Chapter 2606, Chapter 2606, Stepping In. Chapter 2606, Stepping In. Feng Kantien made a name for himself in the heavenly world hundreds of thousands of years ago and obtained the title of the Supreme Perfected Immortal at the Nine Firmament Meet. Now that he had entered the Grotto Heaven realm and become an immortal king, such a massive lineup could not suppress him at all. As for Heavenly Wolf, his former master was Emperor Bo Zun and he had been up against more fearsome lineups. Everything before him was nothing much. Since he had already come this far with no way out, why should he be afraid? Who are the few people beside Feng Kantien? It should be the 7 emotions fiend generals of Tianhuang sect. Over the years, they have also risen to fame in the fiend domain. So, among the 7 emotions fiend generals, apart from Feng Kantien who is an immortal king, the rest are only heaven immortals. Fufu, I thought that they were all incredible experts. Many cultivators on the peak of the builder tree discussed. At the 9 firmament meet, most of them were experts at the perfected immortal realm. Naturally, they did not take Yang Beichen and the other heaven immortals seriously. What is Desolate Marshal and Feng Kantien doing here with a few heaven immortals? Could it be that a mere Tianhuang sect wants to go against our 2 domains? Fufu, that's if Desolate Marshal is tired of living. In the eyes of the immortals and monks, Desolate Marshal and the others on the other end of the immortal fiend abyss were truly too weak and were not worth mentioning. There were more than 100,000 perfected immortal experts and more than 100 immortal kings gathered at the 9 firmament meet. If the immortals swarmed forward together, they would probably drown Desolate Marshal and the others instantly. A cultivator lamented, however, Desolate Marshal Shaw is bold to dare to come to the 9 firmament meet with just a few people. The ignorant are always fearless. Another person disagreed. Beneath the builder tree. Desolate Marshal, how dare you appear at the 9 firmament meet? Qin Ce looked at Desolate Marshal with a cold gaze and said slowly, do you think that the 9 firmament meet is like the peach banquet where you can come and go as you please? Qin Ce had the Supreme Perfected Immortal, Supreme Arhat, and 200 top-tier perfected immortals by his side. Furthermore, he had a group of immortal kings holding down the fort. Naturally, he was fearless. Zhuo Wuchen withdrew his dustless sword and flicked the blade gently with his finger, letting out a clear sword hum as he said coldly, Desolate Marshal, I heard that you hold the title of Supreme. My dustless sword is keen on exchanging pointers with you. Sword Immortal Yu Hua smiled gently. There's no need to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. If he dares to come over, I'll let him witness my moon essence sword first. Desolate Marshal, you're a violent and murderous fiend. If you dare to take a step into the 9 firmament immortal domain, I shall stand out to slay you and purify you into reincarnation. Rank 4 of the Arhat ranking, Shu Ba, said in a deep voice. Beneath the builder tree, the immortals and monks declared bold words with torrential auras. Mo Qing could not take it anymore and could not help but sneer. If you guys have the guts, why don't you dare to cross the immortal fiend abyss and fight him? Suddenly, the surrounding voices paused. Mo Qing's words struck everyone's sore spot. Although the immortals and monks looked confident, none of them dared to cross the immortal fiend abyss rashly and take the initiative to attack the martial Dao Prime body. Firstly, Desolate Marshal was notorious and was known as the Supreme Perfected Fiend. He once caused a huge ruckus at the Immortal Peach Banquet and caused a massacre in Langfeng City. That battle record was way too terrifying. Secondly, if they crossed the Immortal Fiend Abyss, it would mean that Desolate Marshal would get the initiative. Furthermore, there was an Immortal King, Feng Kantien, on the other end who would dare to charge over rashly. Qin Ce sneered, why should we go to the Fiend domain? If Desolate Marshal has the guts, he should come to the 9 firmament immortal domain. I'll say it again. If Desolate Marshal dares to step into the 9 firmament immortal domain, I'll definitely make him spill blood on the spot by executing him. The moment he said that, on the side of the Fiend domain, Desolate Marshal glanced at Chou Siluo behind him and nodded slightly. Thereafter, in front of everyone, Desolate Marshal rode on Heavenly Wolf and crossed the immortal fiend abyss with Zither Fiend Chou Siluo. In the blink of an eye, Desolate Marshal had already descended on the side of the 9 firmament Immortal domain and was heading in the direction of Qin Ce and the others. Pest! Desolate Marshal truly dared to come over. The cultivators were shocked. Who was the one who wanted to spill my blood on the spot by executing me? The gaze of the Marshal Dao Prime body was cold as he surveyed the crowd opposite him with an intimidating aura. Apart from Jun Yu, Shawunyan, and the other cultivators on the perfected Immortal ranking, everyone else averted their gazes and did not dare to meet his. The gaze of the Marshal Dao Prime body lingered on Qin Ce. Instantly, Qin Ce felt immense pressure. An indescribable fear shrouded his head and he could not get rid of it. However, at that moment, he was already in a difficult position. Naturally, he could not take back the boast that he had just made. He could only grit his teeth and say in a deep voice, "I was the one who said it." Before Qin Ce could finish, the Marshal Dao Prime body had already attacked. This time round, his attack came without any warning. In a flash, the Marshal Dao Prime body left the back of Heavenly Wolf and arrived before Qin Ce instantly. Without saying anything more to Qin Ce, the Marshal Dao Prime body punched out. Nobody could describe how terrifying that punch was. His speed and strength had already reached their peak in that punch. Qin Ce's pupils constricted in shock. There were many perfected immortals present, including the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat. However, at that moment, he felt that everyone around him seemed to have vanished. He was the only one left against the Marshal Dao Prime body. In reality, that was the case as well. The sudden attack of the Marshal Dao Prime body was so fast that none of the cultivators present could react. There were so many experts surrounding the place and immortal kings holding down the fort. Nobody expected Desolate Marshal to come forth almost alone and even take the initiative to strike first. "I can't win. I can't defend against this." Instantly, those were the only thoughts in Qin Ce's mind. The punch of the Marshal Dao Prime body made him feel a long-awaited aura of death. Even in the fight for the perfected immortal ranking, he never felt such a strong sense of danger against Jun Yu's astral imprisonment. Escape. Qin Ce was extremely decisive. Without hesitation, he abandoned his physical body and his essence spirit left his body. Carrying the Dao fruit and an ancient book, he fled into the distance. Bang! A single punch from the Marshal Dao Prime body shattered Qin Ce's body. The terrifying punch emitted a scorching heat. Before the flesh could reconstruct, it was burned to ashes by the searing heat of the punch. A single punch destroyed Qin Ce's body completely. That was not all there was to the power of that punch. Qin Ce's reaction was extremely fast. However, the moment his essence spirit escaped from his body, Su Zimo's punch descended. While shattering his body, it enveloped his essence spirit as well. That punch seemed to collapse the surrounding void. No matter how Qin Ce struggled, his essence spirit and Dao fruit could not escape and could only sink deeper. Just as Qin Ce's essence spirit was about to be destroyed by a single punch from the Marshal Dao Prime body, the ancient book beside the Dao fruit suddenly shone with a resplendent light. A terrifying aura burst forth and helped Qin Ce escape from danger. Chapter 2607, Chapter 2607, I'll give you a chance. Chapter 2607, I'll give you a chance. The ball of light released by the Grand Pure Jade Manual actually caused the palm of the Marshal Dao Prime body to feel a sharp pain. The Marshal Dao Prime body frowned slightly in surprise. The true Marshal Dao body had already been cultivated to the perfected realm and the power that could cause him pain definitely did not come from Qin Ce. The Marshal Dao Prime body pondered for a moment and quickly understood. As part of a taboo mystic classic, the Grand Pure Jade Manual was extremely precious. Although Qin Ce had already obtained one of the 3 Pure Ones Jade Manual, the Emperor backing him still left a seal on the ancient book to prevent it from being taken away by outsiders. The Marshal Dao Prime body was calm. It was good if he could get his hands on the Grand Pure Jade Manual, but it did not matter if he could not. His goal this time round was not the Grand Pure Jade Manual to begin with. With the help of the seal left behind by his father, Qin Ce protected his essence spirit and carried the Grand Pure Jade Manual and Dao fruit back to the peak of the Builder Tree. He was scared out of his wits. If not for the seal left behind by his father, he would have died. Even so, he suffered immense losses. His body was destroyed by the martial Dao Prime body and his flesh turned into ashes. He could not even use blood rebirth. The crowd was in an uproar. Nobody expected the martial Dao Prime body to be so domineering that he would dare to attack a prince in front of everyone and even use a killing move. Less than that, no one expected that Qin Ce would be forced to abandon his physical body and flee in panic after being unable to defend against a single punch from the martial Dao Prime body. Qin Ce was not only the son of an emperor, he was rank 2 of the perfected immortal ranking. If even he could not defend against a single punch from Desolate Martial, who else could be a match for him? Immortal King Long Night was enraged and suddenly stood up, glaring at the martial Dao Prime body with a dark expression. The scene earlier on was way too sudden. It was too late for him to step in and save Qin Ce. At that moment, Qin Ce returned. Now, Immortal King Long Night no longer had sufficient reason to attack. After all, that was a fight between perfected immortals. As an immortal king, he cared about his dignity and could not attack Desolate Martial forcefully because of this. Furthermore, he was not certain of the situation on Desolate Martial's side right now and did not know if Emperor Bozun was nearby. As such, he did not dare to act rashly. The other immortal kings had the same thoughts. The fact that Desolate Martial dared to bring these people over and was so domineering and fearless meant that there was a high chance Emperor Bozun was nearby. Beneath the Builder Tree, Jun Yu, Shi Wunyan, and the other immortals and monks had grim expressions and were extremely tense. They glared at the martial Dao Prime body fixedly, afraid that he would attack again. The punch from the martial Dao Prime body earlier on shocked everyone as well. If they were in Qin Ce's position, it would be difficult for them to escape death. While the immortals and monks were stunned by the aura of the martial Dao Prime body and fell into silence, as the supreme perfected immortal, Jun Yu stood out decisively. Enduring the immense pressure surging over from Desolate Martial, Jun Yu asked in a deep voice, "Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain, may I know why you're here?" The martial Dao Prime body merely punched Qin Ce casually and did not continue attacking. "I heard that your 2 domains are holding the 9 firmament meet, so I came to take a look." The voice of the martial Dao Prime body sounded a little deep through the silver mask. "At the same time, I've got some grudges to settle." "What grudges?" Jun Yu asked. "For the sake of an ancient zither, the zither immortal hunted down my subordinates, the zither and flute fiends, for many years. She even chased them all the way to the fiend domain." The gaze of the martial Dao Prime body shifted and landed on Zither Immortal. "Meng Yao, do you think that Tianhuang sect is weak?" Meng Yao knew that she could not hide now that she was targeted by the martial Dao Prime body, so she grit her teeth and stood out, asking, "Desolate Martial, what do you want?" "I'll give you a chance." The martial Dao Prime body said indifferently, "Since you're known as the Zither Immortal, compete in Zither skills with my subordinate, the Zither Fiend. If you win, I'll spare your life." Meng Yao glanced at Qiu Siluo and sneered, "What's Zither Fiend? She's self-proclaimed, right? What rights does she have to compete with me in the Zither? I forgot to mention something." The martial Dao Prime body did not explain and continued, "If you refuse to compete, I'll beat you to death." "You?" Meng Yao was shocked and furious, rendering her speechless. From Desolate Martial's words, it was as though killing her was as simple as crushing an ant. As one of the 4 great fairies, she had always been admired by countless cultivators like a moon surrounded by stars. Everyone was always respectful at the sight of her, afraid that they would be rude. Now, not only did Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain treat her bluntly, he did not care for her beauty at all and said that he wanted to beat her to death. The most frightening thing was that this person did not have any reservations and was domineering. Meng Yao had no doubt that if she said no, Desolate Martial would attack without hesitation and kill her here. Jun Yu and the others frowned in confusion. The immortal kings on the peak of the Builder Tree had strange expressions as well. Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain was here to make Meng Yao compete with her Zither skills. Meng Yao was known as the Zither Immortal and was naturally outstanding in the Zither Dao. The other party wanted to compete with Meng Yao in the Zither Dao? Fu. Sword Immortal Yu Hua chuckled and shook his head gently. How ridiculous. A grade 5 heaven immortal wants to challenge Zither Immortal Meng Yarrow, who is a perfected immortal. Qiu Siluo's cultivation realm was only at the grade 5 heaven immortal realm. The difference between her and Meng Yarrow was immense. In everyone's eyes, the two of them were on completely different levels. That's not fair, right? Mo Qing secretly sent a voice transmission to Yunju. Subconsciously, she was already on the side of the martial Dao prime body and said worriedly, the difference in their cultivation realms is so great. How can the Zither fiend win? Yunju said deeply, if it's just a comparison of Zither skills, it doesn't have much to do with one's cultivation realm. All right. After a moment of silence, Meng Yarrow agreed before sneering, since you guys are the ones asking to be humiliated, don't blame me. Meng Yarrow sat on the ground and placed the ancient Zither horizontally across her knees. She looked at Qiu Siluo, who was not far away, and said, come, let me see how strong you are. The moment she said that, Meng Yarrow's fingertips suddenly plucked the strings of the zither. Clang. A single zither sound was enough to release a chilling killing intent. Instantly, the murderous aura on the battlefield spread and the surrounding temperature dipped. Meng Yarrow used her left hand to create the notes by pushing, pinching, kneading, humming, knocking, and calling. With her right hand, she strummed the strings of the zither through varied and complicated techniques such as plucking, propping, swiping, lifting, hooking and brushing. Clang, clang. The sound of the zither echoed continuously, turning more hurried. The immortals and monks beneath the builder tree seemed to be in a battlefield, surrounded by a massive army. They were ambushed on all sides with killing intents hidden. The zither song played by Meng Yarrow contained a strong killing intent. If the cultivators closed their eyes, they could sense that a massive army was charging over from Meng Yarrow's ancient zither with a deafening might. The cultivators were immersed in it and felt as though they were about to be trampled by the invisible army and sliced into pieces by countless sabers and sword. If the impact was already this strong for bystanders, it was even worse for Qiu Siluo, who was targeted by Meng Yarrow directly. Meng Yarrow's zither sound could be elegant and pleasant. Of course, it could also kill. Chapter 2608, Chapter 2608, Tear the Ranking. Chapter 2608, Tear the Ranking. Just as the emotions of the crowd were gradually stirred by Meng Yarrow's zither sound, a melodious sound of the zither sounded. The Zither Immortal and Zither Fiend were finally fighting. The sound of Qiu Siluo's zither was completely different from Meng Yarrow's. Meng Yarrow's zither sound was murderous and aggressive. There was no sharpness in Qiu Siluo's zither sound. Instead, there was a hint of reminiscence and memory. It was like the warm sun in winter shining down on everyone's hearts. In terms of zither technique, Meng Yarrow was indeed superior to Qiu Siluo. However, it was precisely because Meng Yarrow placed too much emphasis on the precision of her zither techniques that she was tainted with the aura of a craftsman and lacked a bit of piety towards the zither Dao. Meng Yarrow's zither was too utilitarian. She practiced the zither for fame, status, and connections. However, the reason why Qiu Siluo practiced the zither was because she liked it. Her zither carried her Dao and its sound was moving. Meng Yarrow's song was a cold melody. However, Qiu Siluo's song contained her feelings. In the end, what truly touched one's heart was the deep emotion in the faint sound of the zither. Beneath the builder tree, the immortals and monks could not help but be immersed in Qiu Siluo's zither music. For a moment, they forgot where they were and could not help but reminisce about the past with different expressions. Images flashed through Mo Qing's mind. In Avicii, she suffered immense grievances and was bullied and humiliated. However, a purple-robed man with a silver mask suddenly appeared and said something to her. If there are people in the world who slander, bully, humiliate, laugh at, look down on, degrade or hate you, there's no need for you to endure or explain yourself. Just kill them. A faint smile appeared on Mo Qing's face when she recalled that. Yunju recalled that back in Avicii, a refined scholar carried her and escaped. There were only a few layers of clothes between the two of them and it was inevitable that there would be some friction and contact as he sprinted. Yunju lowered her head slightly and blushed. Shi Wunyan had a conflicted expression. Sword Immortal Yu-Hua seemed to have recalled something as his expression darkened and his arms trembled slightly. The perfected immortals and arhats were touched by the sound of Chiu Siluo's zither and fell into reminiscence, recalling the most unforgettable scenes of their lives. Some of them were in tears while others were delighted. Some were melancholic while others were smug. Some of them were dejected while others were invigorated. There was sadness, joy, sorrow, resentment, anger, and frustration. The 7 emotions and 6 desires were all within. Although Meng Yao's zither sound was still present, it was as though everyone could no longer hear it. Even Meng Yao herself fell into some sort of reminiscence. Her eyes were bloodshot and she had a sorrowful expression as a bead-sized tear fell from the corner of her eye. Piak. The tear fell onto the sound of her ancient zither. Although the sound seemed weak, it shocked Meng Yao. Her fingers could not control their strength and with a bang, a zither string snapped. Her fingertips were cut and blood seeped out. That sound woke the immortals and monks up one after another. It was only then that everyone realized what had happened. When they were unprepared earlier on, they were completely immersed in Chiu Siluo's song and were affected by the emotions of the song. Even her opponent, Meng Yao, was not spared. Victory was decided in this zither competition. I was defeated. Meng Yao murmured in disbelief, unable to accept the reality before her. Today's defeat was a huge blow to her. This meant that from now on, she was not worthy of the title of the Zither Immortal. All the glory she had once obtained would vanish into thin air. As a peak perfected immortal, she lost to a grade 5 heaven immortal. This matter would spread through the heavenly world within a few days. At that time, she would become the joke of the 9 firmament immortal domain. What the martial Dao Prime Body did was to defeat Meng Yao in her specialty. This was a devastating blow to Meng Yao's Dao heart. This was even more powerful than suppressing her directly in a head-on battle. Meng Yao sat on the spot dejectedly with a lost gaze as an ancient zither with a snapped string fell casually beside her. The martial Dao Prime Body leaped down from Heavenly Wolf and patted the latter, indicating for him to carry Chiu Siluo back to the Fiend domain first. Heavenly Wolf sensed that the martial Dao Prime Body might make a huge move and was afraid that he would be implicated. He could not wait to leave and ran to Chiu Siluo's side hurriedly. Jun Yu looked at the martial Dao Prime Body with a strong fighting spirit condensed in her eyes. She removed the astral chessboard on her back and said in a deep voice, "Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain, I respect you for your guts. Against the paragons of the perfected immortal and arhat rankings of 2 domains, you even dared to cross the immortal fiend abyss. Now, I'll give you a chance as well. A chance for us to fight fairly. The perfected immortal and arhat rankings of the 2 domains." The martial Dao Prime Body raised his head slightly and looked at the 2 bedazzling ranking lists that hung high above the builder tree, saying indifferently, "In my eyes, your 2 ranking lists are nothing but jokes." Before his sentence was finished, the martial Dao Prime Body merely raised his hand slightly without making any moves. Sheeing. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound, the perfected immortal and arhat rankings that hovered above the builder tree were torn into 2 by a powerful external force. 2 torn ranking lists floated down slowly and the light emitted by the names of the perfected immortals on them gradually dimmed. What? The cultivators were enraged. That action could no longer be considered as a provocation, it was a tight slap on their faces. In front of them, the perfected immortal and arhat rankings were torn apart. To Desolate Marshal, the 2 ranking lists were merely jokes. Those words clearly showed that he did not take the paragons of the 2 domains seriously. How arrogant, fiend. Audacious. Desolate Marshal, the blood feud of thousands of perfected immortals in the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain has to be repaid with blood. The blood of the immortals and monks surged. Even though they were afraid of Desolate Marshal's notorious reputation, they couldn't care less at that moment and many people stood out. This time round, Sword Immortal Yu-Hua was extremely smart and did not say anything. He could vaguely sense something. Right from the beginning, Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain had not even looked at him. However, he felt goosebumps all over, as though a calamity was about to descend at any moment. If not for his dignity, he would have left this place right away. The martial Dao Prime body could not find an excuse to target Sword Immortal Yu Hua and was in no hurry. He was not only here today for Meng Yarrow and Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Desolate Marshal. Right then, Shi Wunyan spoke and asked slowly, "From what I know, the Hell Suppression Tripod is in your hands right now? And if it is?" The martial Dao Prime body asked without even looking at Shi Wunyan. Shi Wunyan took out a Zen staff from his storage bag and said in a deep voice, "The Hell Suppression Tripod is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries and must not be leaked. If you refuse to hand it over, don't blame the monks of the Buddhist monasteries for working together to suppress you." "That's right," Yun Mubai shouted as well. "There's no need to insist on having one-on-one fights with fiends of the fiend domain. Everyone, let's attack together and kill this fiend for the sake of righteousness." The martial Dao Prime body was expressionless. The immortals and monks on the other end merely wanted to group up and attack him. Yet, they had to dig out a dignified excuse for them to do so. That was perfect. He could kill Sword Immortal Yu Hua through the chaos without having to find a reason as well. Chapter 2609, Chapter 2609, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Chapter 2609, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Under Shi Wunyan's instigation, the immortals and monks beneath the Builder Tree glared at the martial Dao Prime body murderously, prepared to attack at any moment. With the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat at the front, what were they afraid of? Furthermore, there was a group of Immortal King experts holding down the fort at the back. If anything were to happen, the Immortal Kings and Heavenly Kings behind them would definitely not sit by idly. "Fiend, surrender!" Shi Wunyan hollered. At the same time, he slammed the Zen staff in his hands heavily on the ground with a loud bang. Coupled with the sound domain secret skill of the Buddhist monasteries released by him, the sound resonated and formed a powerful sound domain attack that was shocking. This was the top-tier sound domain dharmic formulation of the Buddhist monasteries, stern admonition. If one's cultivation was not high enough and they were unprepared, their Dao hearts might collapse if they were struck by stern admonition. The deeper one's comprehension of Buddhism, the stronger this sound domain dharmic formulation would be. In the battle for the Arhat ranking previously, Shi Wunyan suppressed all other top-tier perfected immortals with stern admonition alone. Naturally, Shi Wunyan did not expect to suppress Desolate Marshal with just stern admonition. However, it was enough as long as Desolate Marshal revealed any openings. He would seize the opportunity to release his strongest methods and attack Desolate Marshal. At that time, the other cultivators in the group would attack. Even with a single divine power, secret skill or spirit treasure each, no matter how strong Desolate Marshal was, he wouldn't be able to defend against them. However, to Shi Wunyan's disappointment, Desolate Marshal did not seem to have any reaction when he released his stern admonition. The silver mask was cold and the eyes beneath it were as deep as the ocean and mysterious as the starry skies. "You're too noisy." The martial Dao Prime body glanced at Shi Wunyan and said indifferently. No matter how strong Shi Wunyan was, he was only the Supreme Arhat. A dharmic Dao of this level had no effect on the perfected true martial Dao. Boggy at all. Before his sentence was finished, the martial Dao Prime body suddenly attacked. Without any unnecessary movements, he merely strode forward and punched in Shi Wunyan's direction. That punch was like a volcano eruption as raging tides slammed onto the shore. Instantly, it was as though the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking with an apocalyptic scene. Pest! Shi Wunyan was horrified. He finally understood why Qin Ce was willing to abandon his body and turn to flee against Desolate Marshal's casual punch. This punch that suffocated him should not have existed in this world. How could a human possess such power? In a flash, countless thoughts flashed through Shi Wunyan's mind. Enveloped by that punch, he even wanted to turn and flee. But soon, he made a decision. He could not escape. Qin Ce turned and fled. He managed to survive thanks to the Grand Pure Jade Manual and the power of the seal left behind by an emperor. His physical body was abandoned and completely crippled. If he made the same choice, he might not even be able to survive. The only way he could survive was to release all his trump cards without holding back and choose to defend against Desolate Marshal's punch while waiting for the reinforcements of the other cultivators. It was not as though Shawunian did not have any powerful trump cards. In fact, in the competition for the Arhat ranking, no one was able to force him to use his full strength and release this trump card. At that moment, he had no other choice. Peerless divine power, Buddha Dragon Elephant. Shawunian clasped his palms together and chanted Sanskrit, turning dignified and inviolable. Suddenly, majestic and divine Buddhas appeared around him. They were indomitable and had already materialized, emitting a blinding golden light and a tremendous might. The kasaya on every single Buddha, facial features, and even the fine wrinkles on their faces, brows and eyes were extremely clear, as though Buddhas had descended. The Buddhas chanted Buddhist sutras that reverberated through the world endlessly. At the same time, divine dragons circled around the Buddhas and gigantic divine elephants appeared one after another. The divine dragons roared and the divine elephants trumpeted. It was a divine power of the Buddhist monasteries, Buddha Dragon Elephant. This is. On the peak of the Builder Tree, the green lotus true body's heart skipped a beat and his gaze intensified when he saw that. Back in Tianhuang mainland, during the final battle against Dao Lord Bloodfiend, he was lucky enough to see this divine power from monk Daming. However, in Tianhuang mainland, Buddha Dragon Elephant was a supreme divine power. Furthermore, that supreme divine power could only be comprehended if one had extremely high attainments and deep comprehension of Buddhism. Monk Daming's Buddha Dragon Elephant was extremely similar to Shawunian's. However, there were some differences. The green lotus true body was at the peak of the Builder Tree and was far away, so he could not see everything clearly. With a thought, he secretly released the spirit consonance art and established a connection with the martial Tao prime body. Through the eyes of the martial Tao prime body, he observed the divine power personally and deduced it at the same time. For that reason, the force of the martial Tao prime body's fist paused for a moment and did not continue pummeling down. If not for that, the punch of the martial Tao prime body would have turned this so-called peerless divine power and all the Buddhas, dragons, and elephants into ashes alongside Shawunian. However, everyone else had a different understanding of his actions. In the eyes of the other cultivators, Desolate Marshal had released a punch. Thereafter, Shawunian released his peerless divine power and clashed head-on. Both parties were in a stalemate and were evenly matched. It was difficult to tell who was stronger right away. The immortals and monks were invigorated and their fear of Desolate Marshal decreased. At the very least, the scene before them proved that Desolate Marshal was not that strong and invincible. Sword Immortal Yu Hua heaved a sigh of relief. I knew it. Desolate Marshal may be the supreme perfected fiend, but fellow Daoist Shawunian is the perfected Arhat. They're not that much different. The others had the same thoughts. Only Chess Immortal Jun Yu frowned with a confused expression. As the only perfected immortal among everyone present who had mastered a peerless divine power, her senses were more accurate than others. Although Shawunian's Buddha Dragon Elephant seemed powerful and terrifying, it should not have reached the level of a true peerless divine power. His Buddha Dragon Elephant merely touched the threshold of a peerless divine power. Similar to Yun Ting's immortal vanquishing sword, it was a quasi-peerless divine power. How could Desolate Marshal be in a stalemate with a single quasi-peerless divine power? Jun Yu felt that the scene before her was a little strange. As the supreme perfected immortal, she naturally could not be bothered to join forces with others. She merely watched coldly from the sidelines and frowned. I see. On the battlefield, the two true bodies that had established a connection through the spirit consonance art deduced at the same time and quickly analyzed the secret of Shawunian's Buddha Dragon Elephant. Indeed, there was a high chance for Buddha Dragon Elephant to become a peerless divine power. However, raising this divine power to the level of a peerless divine power did not only require a deep comprehension of Buddhism. One had to reach an extremely high level in the divine powers and secret skills of the dragon and elephant races. Only by fusing the starkly different dharmic Taos of the Buddhist monasteries, the dragon and the elephant race into one could Buddha Dragon Elephant become a true peerless divine power. Chapter 2610, Chapter 2610, Massacre. Chapter 2610, Massacre. In Tianhuang mainland, almost all the Buddhas, divine dragons, and divine elephants conjured by monk Daming's Buddha Dragon Elephant were phantoms. As for Shawunyan's divine power before him, the Buddhas had already materialized, as though their true bodies had descended. It was the same for the divine dragons. They circled around the Buddhas and rode on clouds, no different from true dragons. Only the divine elephants beside the Buddhas did not materialize, although they looked lifelike. Instead, they were phantoms that were less robust and agile. Suzimo was certain that Shawunyan had extremely deep attainments in the Dharmic Tao of the Buddhist monasteries and the dragon race. However, he did not have a deep understanding of the Dharmic Tao of the elephant race and did not meet the requirements. Therefore, his Buddha dragon elephant merely touched the threshold of a peerless divine power and was not considered a true peerless divine power. Suzimo was delighted when he deduced the secret of the Buddha dragon elephant. The Green Lotus true body cultivated the taboo mystic classic of the Buddhist monasteries, the Prajna Nirvana Sutra. Therefore, he definitely had no issue with the Dharmic Tao of the Buddhist monasteries. As for the essence spirit of the Green Lotus true body, it was synthesized with the Dragon Phoenix essence spirit to begin with and controlled many divine powers and secret skills of the dragon race. In terms of comprehension of the Dharmic Tao of the dragon race, he had even surpassed many true dragons. He had dabbled in the Dharmic Tao of the elephant race as well. His innate divine power, the six-tusk divine strength, came from the elephant race. Furthermore, back in the Emperor's tomb, after killing Fang Xian, he obtained a high-quality cultivation technique, the divine elephant breathing technique. It also contained many Dharmic Taos of the elephant race. Back then, Fang Xian relied on this cultivation technique to attract the 4 of 9 heavenly tribulation to ascend. He even cultivated the bloodline of the divine elephant and was extremely strong. After the Green Lotus true body obtained this cultivation technique, he cultivated for many years as well and comprehended something. In other words, the foundation of the Buddha dragon elephant that he cultivated even surpassed Shawunyan. There was a high chance that he could cultivate Buddha dragon elephant into a peerless divine power. In the eyes of others, Shawunyan and Desolate Marshal were in a stalemate. However, nobody expected that Suzimo was deducing and comprehending the Dharmic Tao of Buddha dragon elephant in that few breath. On the battlefield, Shawunyan looked at the clear and bright eyes of the martial Tao prime body beneath the silver mask and suddenly felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. He did not think too much about it and sneered, "That's all there is to the supreme perfected fiend. You're still restrained by my peerless divine power. Your Buddha dragon elephant is not at the level of a peerless divine power." The martial Tao prime body said indifferently. "So what?" Shawunyan said, "A single quasi-peerless divine power is enough to defend against you. You're way too naive." A mocking look flashed through the eyes of the martial Tao prime body. When he saw that gaze, Shawunyan suddenly felt uneasy. "Everyone, what are you waiting? Talk, hurry and attack and join forces to rill this fiend." Without hesitation, Shawunyan growled. Right then, the voice of the martial Tao prime body suddenly sounded in his mind. "Shawunyan, if you want to discuss Buddhism with me, do it in your next life. You are." As though he recalled something, Shawunyan's pupils constricted and he was shocked. He had only told a single person that he wanted to discuss Buddhism. Rank 1 of the heaven ranking, Suzimo of the divine firmament immortal domain. Instantly, as though he understood many things, he looked at the martial Tao prime body with shock and fear. His mouth was agape, as though he wanted to shout or say something. Unfortunately, he no longer had the chance. After Suzimo deduced the secret of Buddha dragon elephant, Shawunyan was no longer of any use to him. Suddenly, the martial Tao prime body exerted strength and his initially idle fist released a shocking divine power once more, shattering Shawunyan's Buddha dragon elephant with ease. Poof! The martial Tao prime body smashed Shawunyan's head with a single punch and a blood mist spread, destroying his essence spirit on the spot. The supreme Arhat, Shawunyan, was dead. At that moment, the divine powers, secret skills, spirit treasures and weapons of the immortals and monks beneath the Builder Tree had already descended, attacking the martial Tao prime body in an overwhelming manner. Apart from Yun Zhu, Mo Qing and Lin Lei, almost all the perfected immortals and Arhats released their strongest attacks. Sword shadows appeared one after another from the dustless sword and its sharpness was revealed. It was filled with a pure sword intent, as though it wanted to cleanse the world of all dust. Shiji gripped his gigantic dagger axe with both hands and charged towards Su Zimo. Yun Mubai summoned his 9 tribulations pure yang spirit treasure, a silver-white umbrella that could be used both offensively and defensively. It opened up all of a sudden and the sharp edge of the immortal umbrella spun rapidly, slicing towards the martial Tao prime body. The experts on the Arhat ranking summoned their sentient dharmic treasures one after another and released their divine powers and secret skills with ferocious attack. 0M. Ma. Ni. Pa. Mi. Hom. Many Arhats chanted Sanskrit of the Buddhist monasteries at the same time, forming an incomparably vast sound domain secret skill. They interacted and resonated, causing their might to increase as they surged towards the martial Tao prime body. Scram. Suddenly, the martial Tao prime body opened his mouth and let out a deafening roar in the direction of the many Arhat. Instantly, millions of living beings seemed to appear behind the martial Tao prime body and shouted at the immortals and monks present in a deafening manner. Bang! 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 Dozens of cultivators beneath the builder tree could not defend against the impact and were shattered by the roar of the martial Tao prime body. Broken limbs flew everywhere. Some cultivators were shocked to death on the spot and their essence spirits were destroyed. The cultivators beneath the builder tree were the top 200 paragons of the 2 domains and the strongest perfected immortals. Even so, none of them could defend against the impact of the sound domain attack. A single roar had already destroyed the attacks of the immortals and monks. Of course, under the deliberate control of the martial Tao prime body, Yunzhu, Mo Qing, and Lin Lei were almost unaffected. The attacks released by the cultivators almost collapsed before they even landed on the martial Tao prime body. By the time the dustless sword approached, the sword technique was already flickering and its strength was depleted. The martial Tao prime body grabbed the dustless sword in reverse and exerted strength in his palm. Crack! There was a crisp sound. The dustless sword was shattered into pieces by the palm of the martial Tao prime body and scattered on the ground. Zhuo Wuchen's expression changed starkly. The dustless sword was a grade 9 pure yang spirit treasure. To think that it would be snapped by desolate Martial's bare hand. What sort of power was that? After the martial Tao prime body broke the sword, he punched in reverse. Zhuo Wuchen's eyes widened and he could not dodge the incoming punch no matter what. Bang! Zhuo Wuchen was turned into a blood mist by a single punch from the martial Tao prime body. Before he could splatter on the ground, he was burned to ashes by the searing heat contained in the fist of the martial Tao prime body and his essence spirit was destroyed. At that moment, the Arhats closed in as well. Without even looking, the martial Tao prime body punched back. Poof! That punch caused the void to collapse. 5 Arhats fell into it and could not break free, enveloped by the fist force of the martial Tao prime body. Poof! 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 All 5 Arhats died, killed by a single punch of the martial Tao prime body. Chapter 2611, Chapter 2611, Defeating Grotto Heaven. Chapter 2611, Defeating Grotto Heaven. The situation had changed way too suddenly. Earlier on, Desolate Martial and Shawunian were evenly matched. To think that Shawunian would be killed by a single punch from Desolate Martial in the blink of an eye. Shawunian's defeat came too quickly and suddenly. The Immortal King experts on the peak of the Builder Tree could not react for a moment. The heavenly kings of the Pure Land of Bliss were shocked and enraged when they saw that. Shawunian was from Mount Meru of the Pure Land of Bliss. He was the strongest of the Buddhist monasteries in this generation and had just been conferred the title of the Supreme Arhat. Who would have thought that Shawunian would be killed on the spot by Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain the second day after obtaining the title of the Supreme Arhat? Shawunian would most likely become the Supreme Arhat who died the fastest in history. By the time the heavenly kings returned to their senses, the battle had already broken out. The martial Tao prime body attacked consecutively and none of the perfected immortal paragons of the 2 domains were his match. Blood flowed like rivers beneath the Builder Tree. The 200 perfected immortals and Arhats who could cultivate beneath the Builder Tree could be considered as the future, foundation, and hope of the 2 domains. They were the most outstanding successors of the major sects and factions. When they saw the paragons and successors die one after another, the immortal kings and heavenly kings of the major sects and factions could no longer sit still. No matter what, they had to save their successors first. If Desolate Marshal were to continue pushing forward, not many of the 200 perfected immortal paragons would survive. The supreme immortal kings of the two domains maintained their composures. It was enough for ordinary immortal kings to step in for something like this. If a supreme immortal king were to step in just to deal with a supreme perfected fiend, it would be too much. Just as the martial Tao Prime body was about to take advantage of the chaos to kill Sword Immortal Yuhua in the crowd, 3 immortal kings and 4 heavenly kings descended and blocked his path. 7 Grotto Heaven Realm experts arrived on the battlefield and released a tremendous spirit consciousness pressure, locking onto the figure of the martial Tao Prime body. Fiend, hurry and stop. The lust for blood is boundless, but you can still repent. Lay down the butcher's knife and you shall gain the chance of redemption to become a Buddha. A heavenly king of the Buddhist monasteries chanted Sanskrit and raised his wooden mallet at the same time, knocking heavily on the wooden fish in his hands with a heart-wrenching sound. 2 other immortal king experts extended their palms and suppressed the martial Tao Prime body as well. Against the attacks of Grotto Heaven Realm experts, the martial Tao Prime body did not retreat but advanced instead. With a cold harumph, he raised his fist and punched twice, colliding against the palms of the 2 immortal king expert. When they saw that, a ridiculous and strange feeling rose in the hearts of the cultivators. They did not know if Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain was a lunatic or out of his mind. Wasn't he committing suicide by fighting against immortal king experts barehanded? Bang! Bang! The 2 immortal kings attacked at an extremely fast speed but retreated even faster. In the blink of an eye, 2 immortal kings were sent flying by 2 punches from the martial Tao Prime body. The 2 immortal kings were shocked. The moment they collided with the martial Tao Prime body, they felt an almost destructive divine power surge into their bodies wildly. The 2 of them could not defend against it at all. Creak. The 2 immortal kings felt a sharp pain in their arms and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Under countless gazes, the flesh on the arms of the 2 immortal kings were torn and their bones were broken into pieces, bursting into a blood mist. Their organs were shaken violently as well as they coughed out large mouthfuls of blood with dispirited expressions. Pest! The cultivators gasped in shock. During normal cultivation, immortal king experts would use the grotto heavens they condensed to nourish their bodies and bloodline. Their physiques were strong and their strength was shocking, far surpassing the perfected one realm. But now, 2 immortal kings were severely injured by 2 punches from a perfected fiend in melee combat. What sort of power was that? How strong was Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain? The remaining immortal king and 4 heavenly kings were shocked by what happened as well. The 5 Grotto Heaven Realm experts had a tacit understanding and summoned their minor Grotto Heavens without hesitation. Boom! 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 The 5 Grotto Heaven Realm experts released their minor Grotto Heavens and did not dare to hold back at all. They channeled their immortal king realm combat strength to the peak. The troublesome and terrifying nature of the methods of Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain had already exceeded their imagination. They did not want to suffer a huge loss in the hands of Desolate Marshal in front of everyone. The martial Tao Prime body looked at the immortal king and 4 heavenly kings with a cold gaze and a shuddering sinister aura. Immediately after, the martial Tao Prime body channeled his blood chi and the deafening sound of a tsunami echoed from his body as his aura surged. 2 purple flames burned in his eyes as well. They were deep and bright and could not be ignored. The next moment, the martial Tao Prime body strode forward once more and punched out against the 5 immortal king expert. That punch enveloped the immortal king and 4 heavenly kings. It exploded like fire and surged like the sea. Although that punch seemed simple, it condensed all the dharmic Tao and will of the martial Tao. It was unyielding and resisting. It was true to the heart and allows one to exact revenge and repay gratitude as they please. This was a simple punch without any unnecessary movements. The Tao was simplicity itself. The Prime Body's fist was the martial Tao. All the dharmic Tao and power of the perfected true martial Tao body were gathered on that punch. Boom! The fist of the martial Tao prime body collided with the 5 grotto heavens opposite him, and the surrounding void trembled. Immediately after, the gazes of the immortal king and 4 heavenly kings changed gradually. The 5 of them looked at the martial Tao prime body in shock and fear as Tnufkne were 100k running at a goer. Bang! Boom! Right in front of everyone, the grotto heavens that the 5 of them had just propped up were crushed by a single punch from the martial Tao prime body and collapsed into nothingness. What? The cultivators widened their eyes in shock and disbelief. This scene had already exceeded the understanding of the cultivators. The power of the supreme perfected fiend could already cross the perfected one and grotto heaven realm to reach such a terrifying level. Even the supreme immortal kings on the peak of the builder tree stood up instinctively in shock. Given their sharpness, they could naturally tell that desolate Marshall's punch earlier on did not involve the power of a grotto heaven. In other words, desolate Marshall of the fiend domain had yet to advance to the grotto heaven realm. That punch merely made use of the power released by his body and bloodline. Even so, it was already so terrifying. Although the immortal king and 4 heavenly kings had only condensed minor grotto heavens, the minor grotto heaven was still the strongest technique of grotto heaven experts. How could it be destroyed by a single punch? Even for them, it was difficult for them to do that without releasing their major grotto heavens. When the 5 minor grotto heavens collapsed, the immortal king and 4 heavenly kings were shocked. They no longer dared to stand in front of the martial Tao prime body as they retreated hurriedly to avoid him. 7 grotto heaven experts had just charged forward when they were dispersed by a few punches from the martial Tao prime body. The moment the 7 immortal kings retreated, the perfected immortal paragons beneath the builder tree were exposed to the martial Tao prime body once more. The gaze of the martial Tao prime body shifted and landed on Sword Immortal Yuhua. Pest! Instantly, Sword Immortal Yuhua felt his hairs stand on end and his scalp tingle. Even his body no longer seemed to be within his control. He was targeted. Chapter 26:12, Chapter 26:12, You re not my match. Chapter 26:12, You re not my match. Sword Immortal Yuhua felt extremely wronged. Under the instigation of Shawunyan, Zhuawuchen, and the others, more than half of the cultivators beneath the builder tree attacked the martial Tao prime body. There were very few cultivators who did not attack the entire time, and he was one of them. Yun Zhu and Mo Qing knew the martial Tao prime body and would naturally not attack. As the supreme perfected immortal, Jun Yu was embarrassed to join forces with others and did not move. The reason why Sword Immortal Yuhua did not attack was simple. It was because his 6th sense was telling him that a huge calamity was about to befall him. Furthermore, for some unknown reason, he had a feeling that desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain was going to make a move on him. The reason why Sword Immortal Yuhua did not attack was because he was afraid that he would do something that would give desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain a reason to attack. However, he did not expect that although he behaved himself and did not lay a single finger on desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain, he was still targeted in the end despite having no feud with the latter. Sword Immortal Yuhua was puzzled, indignant and aggrieved. Earlier on, desolate Marshal unleashed his fiend nature and even immortal kings of the Grotto Heaven realm were severely injured by him. What could a rank 9 of the perfected immortal ranking like him do? Desolate Marshal could probably crush him with a single finger. Sword Immortal Yuhua was in no mood to defend. Without hesitation, he turned and fled while shouting for help in the direction of the peak of the builder tree. Trying to escape. The martial Tao prime body sneered and in a flash, sped towards Sword Immortal Yuhua at an extremely fast speed. No one dared to stop him wherever he passed. Right then, a figure flashed before him, mysterious as though it was carrying a vast starry sky on its back. The supreme perfected immortal, Jun Yu, had appeared. She was unwilling to join forces with others to deal with the martial Tao prime body. Right now, she was the only one who dared to stand out and block the path of the martial Tao prime body as well. When she saw that, Mo Qing was alarmed and worried about Jun Yu's safety. After all, in her opinion, desolate Marshal was fearless in his actions. He came from the fiend domain and was decisive to kill. Even immortal kings who stood in his way were suppressed by him. What could Junyu do? Don't worry. Right then, Yunju's voice sounded in Emo Qing's mind with conviction. Nothing will happen to Junyu. Yunju knew the identity of the martial Dao Prime body. That was the reason why she was certain that the martial Dao Prime body would definitely not hurt Junyu. When he saw Junyu blocking his way, the martial Dao Prime body paused for a moment and said indifferently, "You're not my match." Before his sentence was finished, the martial Dao Prime body had already attacked. Unlike his previous attacks, this time round, the martial Dao Prime body did not release any apocalyptic punch. He merely closed two fingers and formed a finger sword, piercing towards Junyu's glabella. Before the finger sword arrived, Junyu felt her glabella swell slightly and a sharp pain. Indeed, he's very strong. Junyu thought to herself. Against Desolate Martial, she did not dare to hold back either. She conjured hand seals with both hands and pointed gently in the direction of the martial Dao Prime body, shouting softly, "Astral imprisonment." Junyu did not hold back and released that peerless divine power right away. A powerful and mysterious power descended instantly. Everything in the space could not move and the passage of time could not be sensed. The air around the martial Dao Prime body seemed to have quietened down instantly. However, before long, a purple halo burst forth from the perfected true martial Dao body. It shone with countless mysterious runes and the martial Dao Prime body broke free from astral imprisonment instantly. To be precise, he did not break free. That peerless divine power did not affect the martial Dao Prime body much. The entire situation was like a chess game. Junyu was disadvantaged after that single move. The martial Dao Prime body had already arrived before Junyu and his finger sword hovered above her glabella, ready to spit out sword chi with killing intent at any moment. In a flash, Junyu moved diagonally to the back. Her movement technique was strange and extremely mysterious. The 9 palace subtle steps of Immortal Queen Ling Long. Speed was not the focus of the 9 palace subtle steps. However, in a battle, one could often survive through deadly situations and find new openings. Junyu released the 9 palace subtle steps and intended to distance herself from the martial Dao Prime body for the time being before making further plans. However, the moment Junyu dodged to the side, the martial Dao Prime body moved and followed her, as though he was tearing through the voids. The two of them were almost one after another and there was no gap between them. The finger sword of the martial Dao Prime body was still hovering above Junyu's glabella. Junyu's heart skipped a beat as she hurriedly released the 9 palace subtle steps once more, wanting to break free from the pursuit of the martial Dao Prime body. However, the martial Dao Prime body followed suit like a shadow. How is that possible? Junyu was alarmed. Desolate Martial could resolve the 9 palace subtle steps and even follow them? I've already said that you're not my match. The martial Dao Prime body emphasized once more. In a flash, he chased in the direction of Sword Immortal Yuhua. Don't leave, the outcome has yet to be decided. Junyu took a step forward, wanting to stop the martial Dao Prime body. However, she suddenly felt a trace of warmth flowing down from her glabella. Instinctively, Junyu touched it and her hands were filled with blood. Her glabella was pierced. In other words, earlier on, Desolate Martial could have pierced her essence spirit if he had taken a single inch forward with his finger sword. However, why did Desolate Martial not kill her although he had already gone on a rampage? Junyu could vaguely sense that Desolate Martial seemed to treat her differently. At the very least, he did not release overly ferocious and terrifying attacks. Instead, he held back. Suddenly, Junyu felt a sense of helplessness. The difference between them was way too great. In front of Desolate Martial of the Fiend Domain, even her fighting spirit was suppressed so badly that she could no longer raise her head fully. Although there was a slight delay, the martial Dao Prime body was extremely fast. Just as Sword Immortal Yuhua was about to arrive at the Builder Tree mountain range, he caught up to the latter. Phew! Without a second word, the martial Dao Prime body punched out. Suddenly, in the void beside Sword Immortal Yuhua, a crack appeared and a white-haired old man appeared in a flash. He glared at the martial Dao Prime body and shouted, "Fiend, How dare you injure a disciple of our academy? The Grand Elder of Heaven and Earth Academy had descended. Although the Grand Elder of the Academy was old, he had a major grotto heaven after all and was a supreme immortal king. When he saw that ordinary immortal kings could not stop the martial Tao prime body at all, the Grand Elder of the Academy could not sit still and could only appear personal. No matter what, Sword Immortal Yuhua was the #1 legacy disciple of the Academy and they could not afford to lose him. The Grand Elder of the Academy extended his slightly scrawny palm and clenched it into a fist, channeling his bloodline to collide with the fist of the martial Tao prime body. Bang! The fists collided with a dull sound of defeat. Neither of them retreated a step back. A cold glint flashed through the eyes of the martial Tao prime body as he looked at Sword Immortal Yuhua, who was escaping wildly towards the peak of the builder tree. He channeled his essence spirit and circulated his divine powers and dharmic arts, pointing at Sword Immortal Yuhua from afar. Eternal damnation. A peerless divine power was released. The martial Tao prime body rarely used divine powers or secret skills in battle. It was not because he had not mastered them, but because most of the time, there was no need for him to do it. His divine powers and secret skills were long fused into his true martial Tao body. The moment the martial Tao prime body released a divine power, it was a peerless divine power that caused a commotion. Sword Immortal Yuhua turned back with a pale expression and despair in his heart. Given his strength, he could not withstand the peerless divine power at all. Furthermore, eternal damnation was even more terrifying than astral imprisonment in terms of killing power. The Grand Elder of the Academy was held back by the martial Tao prime body and could not extricate himself for the time being. He could only wave his robes and release a powerful secret skill that charged towards eternal damnation. Chapter 2613, Chapter 2613, Punishment. Chapter 2613, Punishment. Eternal damnation originated from the final heavenly tribulation of the 9 of 9 heavenly tribulations. A myriad of heavenly tribulations transformed into countless runes that emitted a destructive aura and descended, covering the skies densely. There was the formation tribulation, residency tribulation, destruction tribulation, emptiness tribulation, fire tribulation, water tribulation, wind tribulation, weapon tribulation. Each tribulation evolved into countless minor tribulations, 3 calamities, 9 catastrophes, and 10 negative karma tribulations. Like a tsunami of heavenly tribulations, they surged and devoured towards Sword Immortal Yuhua. Instantly, an apocalyptic scene appeared above Sword Immortal Yuhua's head. In the tsunami of heavenly tribulations, Sword Immortal Yuhua trembled slightly and looked incomparably insignificant. The sharpness of the true essence on his body was already torn into pieces. Sword Immortal Yuhua endured the pressure with bloodshot eyes. As though he was giving it his all, he channeled his Tao fruit essence spirit and condensed his true essence, releasing divine powers and secret skills one after another. However, his divine powers and secret skills surged into the tsunami of heavenly tribulations like a rock entering the sea. They did not cause any ripples and vanished in the blink of an eye. In the face of the peerless divine power, all his counterattacks were insignificant. Right then, the secret skill of the Grand Elder of the Academy descended and a heavenly encompassing palm appeared above Sword Immortal Yuhua's head, supporting the surging tsunami of heavenly tribulation. Although the peerless divine power was strong, the martial Tao prime body was restricted by his cultivation realm and eternal damnation could not injure a supreme immortal king like the Grand Elder of the Academy. However, the tsunami of heavenly tribulations surged continuously, wanting to flow through the gaps between the fingers of the heavenly encompassing palm and continue to threaten Sword Immortal Yuhua. The Grand Elder of the Academy harumphed coldly and suddenly exerted strength in his heavenly encompassing palm, gripping it into a fist. Boom! The tsunami of heavenly tribulations suddenly exploded and a loud bang sounded in midair. The grab of that heavenly encompassing palm contained the terrifying power of a supreme immortal king and destroyed the divine power of eternal damnation instantly. Sword Immortal Yuhua was right beside the heavenly encompassing palm and eternal damnation. The aftershock of the collision of the two powers surged and formed a storm that engulfed him instantly. Sword Immortal Yu Hua shrieked. Although eternal damnation was destroyed by the Grand Elder of the Academy, there were still many dilapidated heavenly tribulations and damaged runes that retained the dharmic Tao of the peerless divine power. Naturally, such a dharmic Tao posed no threat to an immortal king. But, Sword Immortal Yu Hua was only a perfected immortal and could not defend against it at all. If the Grand Elder of the Academy had not chosen to fight eternal damnation head-on and merely blocked it, Sword Immortal Yu Hua would have had a chance to escape. However, the Grand Elder of the Academy chose to take the peerless divine power head-on. The aftershock spread and it was too late for Sword Immortal Yu Hua to escape. In the blink of an eye, wounds appeared on Sword Immortal Yu Hua's body. Some of them were so deep that his bones could be seen, and some of them even revealed his organs in a shocking manner. The most tragic thing was that one of Sword Immortal Yu Hua's arms made contact with a shattered rune of the weapon tribulation and it was forcibly severed. Sword Immortal Yu Hua fell to the ground and his body convulsed continuously, letting out a tragic cry. He was covered in blood and did not even look like a human anymore. When the Grand Elder of the Academy saw the tragic state of Sword Immortal Yu Hua, his expression changed. He propped up his major grotto heaven and repelled the martial Tao prime body, arriving beside Sword Immortal Yu Hua instantly. The Grand Elder of the Academy took out a few immortal pills and sent them into Sword Immortal Yu Hua's mouth. Thereafter, he conjured hand seals consecutively and released a few healing secret skills that struck Sword Immortal Yu Hua. It hurts. After a few healing secret skills, Sword Immortal Yu Hua's cries turned even more tragic. His body convulsed and his injuries showed no signs of healing. Perhaps because the immortal pills had some effect or because of the few healing secret skills of the Grand Elder of the Academy, Sword Immortal Yu Hua seemed to have regained a momentary clarity as he looked at the Grand Elder with a pleading expression. "It's too painful. Hurry, kill me and give me a swift death." Sword Immortal Yu Hua's voice trembled slightly. Looking at Sword Immortal Yu Hua at the foot of the mountain, the cultivators gasped and shuddered when they heard the terrifying tragic cries. Eternal damnation, that's way too terrifying. Once he's struck by that peerless divine power, no injuries can be healed. At this rate, Sword Immortal Yu Hua won't be able to hold on for long and will be tortured to death by his injuries. One of the three great sword immortals of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain and rank 9 of the Perfected Immortal ranking. To think that he would end up in such a state today. When the immortals and monks saw that, they were filled with emotions. Initially, everyone felt pity for Shi Wunyan and the others when they saw Desolate Marshal kill them with a single punch. But now, compared to Sword Immortal Yu Hua, Shi Wunyan and the others might have been lucky to die without any pain. Another person sighed. If he had known earlier, Sword Immortal Yu Hua wouldn't have escaped. He would have chosen to be punched to death by Desolate Marshal instead of suffering such pain and torture. Although Mo Qing was long displeased with Sword Immortal Yu Hua, she could not help but shake her head and sigh gently when she saw him in such a tragic state. Sword Immortal Yu Hua had once said in front of her, "If Desolate Marshal dares to appear in front of me, I'll definitely sever his facade and destroy his myth with a single slash." Those words seemed to have happened yesterday. It was a little ironic when she recalled that scene. Back then, even Sword Immortal Yu Hua himself had not expected that he would truly encounter Desolate Marshal and end up in such a state. Although there were many cultivators present, apart from Yun Zhu, there was probably no one else who knew why Desolate Marshal targeted Sword Immortal Yu Hua. Sword Immortal Yu Hua targeted Su Zimo repeatedly and even joined forces with outsiders to try and kill him. If he killed Sword Immortal Yu Hua directly, it would be letting the latter off too easily. The only way to punish him was to let him die in pain and torment. At the side of the Green Firmament Immortal Domain, Lin Luo looked at Sword Immortal Yu Hua, who was covered in blood and screaming repeatedly, and frowned slightly. "Mother, is there no way to dispel eternal damnation?" Lin Luo asked. Immortal Queen Ling Long said, "Of course there is, but it's very difficult unless Yu Hua can comprehend the secrets of the Grotto Heaven realm and become an immortal king. Judging from his current situation, it's difficult for him to survive, let alone attempt to advance to the Grotto Heaven realm." Lin Luo asked again, Eternal damnation is only a peerless divine power after all. Can't the immortal kings purge and suppress that power? Of course we can. Immortal Queen Ling Long said, any immortal king present can purge eternal damnation as long as they summon their grotto heaven. However, at the same time, Yuhua won't be able to survive and will be crushed to death by the power of the grotto heaven. The dharmic Tao of eternal damnation had already fused into every single wound on Sword Immortal Yuhua's body. If his essence spirit wanted to escape, it would be struck by the power of eternal damnation. Purging eternal damnation from him meant that his body, bloodline, and even eternal damnation would be suppressed and crushed. Pausing for a moment, Immortal Queen Ling Long changed the topic. However, nothing is absolute. If there's an immortal king whose grotto heaven condenses endless life force, it might be able to help him dispel eternal damnation and save his life. However, there are extremely few immortal kings like that. At the very least, I've never heard of an immortal king in the heavenly world possessing such a grotto heaven. Chapter 26:14, Chapter 26:14, A Slap. Chapter 26:14, A Slap. The Grand Elder of the Academy looked at Sword Immortal Yuhua, who was in pain with a conflicted and hesitant expression. He raised his palm slowly, but it hovered in midair, unable to descend. Killing Sword Immortal Yuhua and giving him a swift death so that he would not be tormented by eternal damnation might just be the best outcome for him. However, Sword Immortal Yuhua was the #1 legacy disciple of the Academy after all, and the Grand Elder could not bring himself to do it. Yuhua, if I send you back to the Academy, the sect master might be able to save your life. As for the Grand Elder of the Academy hesitated and did not continue. He did not wish to continue inflicting blows on Sword Immortal Yuhua. Even if the sect master of the Academy could save Sword Immortal Yuhua's life, he would be more than half crippled. Sword Immortal Yuhua might even be inferior to many legacy disciples in the future, let alone advance to the Grotto Heaven realm to become an immortal king. Furthermore, this blow would have a huge impact on Sword Immortal Yuhua. From now on, the title of Sword Immortal Yuhua in the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain and even the entire heavenly world would be completely destroyed. The Grand Elder of the Academy sighed gently and tore through the void with Sword Immortal Yuhua, returning to Heaven and Earth Academy. Apart from him, there were more than 100 ordinary immortal kings and more than 20 supreme immortal kings watching. Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain could not escape at all. For the Grand Elder of the Academy, it was more important to save Sword Immortal Yuhua. On the side of the Green Firmament Immortal Domain, although Immortal Queen Ling Long was still seated a far distance away, her upper body was slightly straightened and she had a grim expression, looking tense. Su Zimo, if your aim was to suppress the Zither Immortal this time round, you have already achieved your goal. You should leave as soon as possible or it will be too late. Immortal Queen Ling Long sent a voice transmission to the Green Lotus true body on the side of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain and reminded secretly with her spirit consciousness. There's no hurry. Su Zimo replied. Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned slightly and reminded again, you have to understand that now that you have injured and forced back ordinary immortal kings, the supreme immortal kings present can no longer sit still. You just fought with the Grand Elder of the Academy. You should know that the difference in strength between ordinary immortal kings and supreme immortal kings is extremely great. I saw that you didn't gain any advantage in your clash with the Grand Elder of the Academy. In fact, I'm afraid you were even disadvantaged. Su Zimo sent a voice transmission, indeed. The power of my martial Dao Prime body is not enough to go against supreme immortal kings yet. One more thing. Immortal Queen Ling Long continued. The situation here is unlike Langfeng, city of the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain. Back then, there were no immortal kings holding down the fort and you could leave with your hell suppression tripod at any time. However, at this moment, the supreme immortal kings present can't sit still any longer. If these people join forces and seal the void, you won't be able to leave this place even if you want to summon the hell suppression tripod to break through the void. Sealing the void was something that immortal king experts could do. Immortal Queen Linglong was afraid that Su Zimo might not understand the pros and cons fully, so she reminded him. Since Immortal King experts could break through the void, they could naturally join forces to seal the void to prevent other Immortal King experts from leaving casually. Once the 20-odd Supreme Immortal Kings present attacked and sealed the void, even if Immortal Queen Linglong joined the fray, she would not be able to escape with the Martial Dao Prime body. At that time, no one would be able to save the Martial Dao Prime body. Su Zimo had a calm expression. Thank you for your reminder, Senior Linglong. It would be best if these Supreme Immortal Kings joined forces to seal the void. I was even afraid that they would be wary and not dare to attack the Martial Dao Prime body. Immortal Queen Linglong was smart and could vaguely tell that Su Zimo seemed to be implying something. However, she could not figure it out right away and said exasperatedly, "You killed perfected immortal paragons of the two domains so domineeringly and even injured a few immortal kings. Even if they have reservations, they can't sit by idly and let you do whatever you want. Do be careful." Immortal Queen Linglong reminded again. On the battlefield. The Martial Dao Prime body did not stop the Grand Elder of the Academy from taking Sword Immortal Yuhua away. His heart skipped a beat and his expression turned cold when he sensed the commotion behind him. The Martial Dao Prime body released his spirit consciousness and gathered the remaining Eternal Damnation Dharmic Dao in his palm, turning it into a dark red light. Immediately after, he retreated and sped in the direction of the Immortal Fiend Abyss. After the outcome for the Zither competition between the Zither Immortal and Fiend was decided, Heavenly Wolf obeyed the orders of the Martial Dao Prime body and carried Cho Siluo in the direction of the Fiend domain. Thereafter, a huge battle broke out beneath the Builder Tree and the Martial Dao Prime body went on a massacre. Out of curiosity, Heavenly Wolf turned around and looked back while heading towards the Immortal Fiend Abyss at a slightly slower speed. Just as the Martial Dao Prime body was fighting against the Grand Elder of the Academy, Zither Immortal Meng Yaro, who was initially still slumped on the ground in a daze, suddenly snapped out of her stupor. It was as though she had regained consciousness instantly. She raised her head suddenly and looked at Cho Siluo, who was in the distance with deep jealousy in her eyes. Swoosh! In a flash, Meng Yaro chased after Cho Siluo with a cold and murderous expression. When Heavenly Wolf saw Meng Yaro chasing after them, he could not help but jump in shock and sprinted towards the Immortal Fiend Abyss hurriedly. However, his and Cho Siluo's cultivation realms were only at the Heaven Immortal realm. In terms of speed, they could not compare to Meng Yaro, who was at the peak of the perfected Immortal realm. Just as he was about to reach the Immortal Fiend Abyss, Meng Yaro caught up to him. "Your Zither skills can't compare to mine at all." Meng Yaro looked at Cho Siluo on the back of the Heavenly Wolf and felt endless indignance as she shrieked, "The reason why you can defeat me is because of the soul-reaping Zither. This ancient Zither should have been an opportunity for me. As long as I kill you and retrieve the soul-reaping Zither, I will still be the Zither Immortal and one of the 4 great fairies." There was no fear on Cho Siluo's face. Instead, there was a hint of pity in the way she looked at Meng Yaro. "Do you really think that your defeat was because of an external object?" Cho Siluo asked softly. Those words pierced Meng Yaro's chest like a sharp blade. She shuddered. As Cho Siluo had said, she knew very well in the depths of her heart the reason why she was defeated. She blamed everything on the soul-reaping Zither because she was unwilling to face it. "I don't care." Meng Yaro grit her teeth. "I want to take back what is mine." Meng Yaro was not only referring to the soul-reaping Zither, but also all of the glory and reputation that once belonged to her. Die. Meng Yaro channeled her Dao fruit and a halo appeared behind her head. Her spirit consciousness condensed and she released an essence spirit secret skill at Cho Siluo. Right then, a figure suddenly appeared and blocked in front of Meng Yaro. Her essence spirit secret skills collided against the silver mask on the figure's face and seemed to ripple before vanishing. The Martial Dao Prime body had arrived. "You." When Meng Yaro saw the mask and looked at the pair of eyes burning with purple flames behind the silver mask, her expression changed and she was so scared that she could not speak. The Martial Dao Prime body was expressionless as he raised his hand and slapped Meng Yaro. A scarlet light flashed in his palm and entered Meng Yaro's cheek. That was the remnant of eternal damnation. Chapter 2615, Chapter 2615, Other Schemes. Chapter 2615, Other Schemes. Piak. The slap of the martial Dao prime body sent Meng Yarrow flying dozens of feet away. Initially, Meng Yarrow thought that she would definitely die. After all, she had just witnessed the methods of the martial Dao prime body, and he could even kill Shi Wunyan with a single punch. Even the minor grotto heavens of immortal kings were shattered. No matter how tough her head was, she could not defend against the power of desolate martial slap. However, when she was sent flying, her ears buzzed and her vision blurred. She composed herself and sat up. She was not dead. A fiend like desolate martial actually knew how to cherish women. Instantly, Meng Yarrow's mind was filled with thoughts. However, she quickly noticed something unusual. Many cultivators in the surroundings looked at her strangely with a hint of fear and pity. Some cultivators were even unwilling to meet her gaze and averted it. Right then, Meng Yarrow finally felt a tearing pain on her cheek. Instinctively, she touched it and her palm was filled with blood. Such superficial wounds had no effect on perfected immortals at all. Meng Yarrow channeled her essence spirit Dao fruit and circulated her bloodline, wanting to heal the injuries on her cheek. However, she quickly realized that the wound on her face could not heal. Even after she consumed a large number of immortal pills, there were no signs of recovery. Although the blood flow from the wound had stopped for the time being, there was a menacing scar on her face. Her bright red flesh was overturned and her initially beautiful face was completely torn apart. Anyone who saw that face would only feel fear and would definitely not associate her with the heavenly four great fairies. At that moment, Meng Yarrow finally understood why the surrounding cultivators were looking at her strangely. The two reasons why she was able to become one of the four great fairies were because of her superb zither skills and her devastatingly beautiful face. Those were also the reasons why she was proud. But now, desolate marshal of the fiend domain had appeared and destroyed two of her most valued element. Everyone knew in their hearts that what desolate marshal just did was even more terrifying than killing zither immortal Meng Yarrow directly. This outcome was a fate worse than death for Meng Yarrow. In reality, after eternal damnation was struck by the secret skill of the Grand Elder of the Academy and more than half of it was absorbed by sword immortal Yuhua, there was not much power left in the Dharmic Tao. Even so, it left an irrecoverable scar on Meng Yarrow's face. "You've ruined me. Why? Why are you so cruel to me? I have no feud with you at all." Meng Yarrow sat in the mud with disheveled hair and a lost expression. She murmured softly with listless eyes. The blow to her this time round was way too great. In fact, the martial Dao prime body even killed her chance of making a comeback. The beauty and zither Dao that she relied on was crippled by the martial Dao prime body. She lost all her dignity today and her past glory vanished into thin air. In less than half a day, she fell from her high and mighty pedestal into a bottomless abyss where she could not see the light of day. Right then, on the other side, Thunder Monarch Heavenly Wrath rushed over when he saw that Cho Siluo was in danger. However, by the time he arrived, the martial Dao prime body had already dealt with Meng Yarrow. "Zimo, let's go. Today's matter has ended." Feng Kantian looked at the group of immortal kings opposite him and felt uneasy as he sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness. Although he was fearless, he did not want to die here foolishly. In the future, he was going to kill his way back to the divine firmament immortal domain and take revenge on King Jin and his heir. "Brother Feng, take them back first." The tone of the martial Dao prime body was calm, as though he did not notice any danger. "We'll leave together," Feng Kantian insisted. The martial Dao prime body said, "Take Heavenly Wolf and Cho Siluo back to the other side first. Remember, don't attack no matter what happens later on." "You." Feng Kantian could tell that there seemed to be a deeper meaning in the words of the martial Dao prime body. He did not ask in detail and merely nodded. He led Heavenly Wolf and Cho Siluo to leap through the immortal fiend abyss and return to the fiend domain. "Isn't the sect master coming back yet?" Jiyu Tongyo's eyes were melancholic and worried. Feng Kantian pondered for a moment. The sect master should have other motives. "Let's wait and see. Don't act rashly." Beneath the builder tree. The top 200 perfected immortal paragons of the nine firmament immortal domain and pure land of bliss seized the opportunity to disperse and flee far away. There were only a few people who remained on the spot. Among them were the three great fairies, Book Immortal Yun Zhu, Painting Immortal Mo Qing and Chess Immortal Jun Yu. The martial Tao prime body walked slowly towards the builder tree. The immortal kings were secretly alarmed and tore through the void one after another, blocking in front of the martial Tao prime body. They were on guard and nervous. All the immortal kings witnessed what happened earlier on. A single punch from the martial Tao prime body shattered the grotto heavens of 5 immortal kings. How far had Desolate Martial cultivated to? The many immortal kings could clearly tell that Desolate Martial did not have the aura of the grotto heaven realm. However, the power he released was even above the ordinary immortal kings. On the peak of Builder Tree, the 20-odd supreme immortal kings exchanged glances and stood up slowly, emitting a tremendous might that surged over. Immortal Queen Ling Long glanced sideways at Su Zimo of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain. At that moment, Su Zimo had a calm expression, as though he could not sense any danger. If you want to leave, this is your last chance. Immortal Queen Ling Long hesitated for a moment and could not help but send a voice transmission with yet another reminder. She could not divine everything about the martial Tao prime body, nor could she guess his intentions. Don't worry, Senior. Su Zimo's voice was calm and he did not explain further. The martial Tao prime body looked at the 20-odd supreme immortal kings on the peak of Builder Tree and suddenly said, "Why? Are the supreme immortal kings of the two domains prepared to attack?" Prince Qin Ce of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain was crippled and Immortal King Long Night was enraged. At that moment, his gaze was dark as he said slowly, "Desolate Martial, how dare you come to the Nine Firmament? Meet and start a massacre. If we let you leave alive, where will our dignity go?" "That's right." Immortal King Qingyang raised his voice and said, "You claim to be the supreme perfected fiend, but in reality, you're already an immortal king expert who can defeat those with minor grotto heavens. It won't be considered bullying if we attack you. Desolate Martial, there's no need for you to try and escape from this place." Immortal King Kai Ping sneered, "I don't mind telling you that the void here has already been sealed by us. Even if you summon the Hell Suppression Tripod, you won't be able to escape back to Avicii." Amitabha. Heavenly King Luo Shun of the Pure Land of Bliss clasped his palms together and chanted the Buddhist proclamation softly. "Desolate Martial, the Hell Suppression Tripod in your possession is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries. It's time for you to return it to its rightful owner today." The Hell Suppression Tripod was the Emperor weapon of Great Emperor Infinite and was related to Avicii. Even the immortal kings of the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain wanted to take it for themselves, let alone the heavenly kings of the Pure Land of Bliss. Furthermore, when they saw the martial Tao prime body release such a terrifying power, the imaginations of the immortal kings ran wild and they thought that it had something to do with Avicii. "All right." The eyes of the martial Tao prime body shone with purple flames and his fighting spirit surged as he said slowly, "This is a good opportunity for me to experience the capabilities of the supreme immortal kings of the two domain." Chapter 2616, Chapter 2616, Everlasting Night. Chapter 2616, Everlasting Night. When the martial Tao prime body said that, the immortals and monks on the peak of the Builder Tree were shocked. How many years had it been since the rise of the Fiend Domain's Desolate Martial? Desolate Martial had just been conferred the title of the Supreme Perfected Fiend not long ago. Today, he was actually declaring that he wanted to fight against the Supreme Immortal Kings of the two domains. It was only at that moment that everyone gradually understood that the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat were not Desolate Martial's targets. In the eyes of Desolate Martial, the two ranking lists were indeed a joke. Desolate Martial was here for the immortal kings of the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and Pure Land of Bliss. Furthermore, it was the supreme immortal kings. Ever since the Nine Firmament meet was held, no one from the Fiend Domain had dared to cause trouble here. Furthermore, the Nine Firmament meet this time round was different from the past. The two domains sent more than 100 ordinary immortal kings and more than 20 supreme immortal kings with a massive might. Up till the end of the perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings, everything went smoothly and peacefully. Who would have thought that desolate Marshal of the Fiend domain would single-handedly cause a bloodstorm at the 9 Firmament meet today? Let's see what else you have. Immortal King Long Knight of the Grand Firmament Immortal domain attacked and arrived before the Marshal Dao Prime body instantly. He raised his palm and slapped the head of the Marshal Dao Prime body. After entering the Grotto Heaven realm and becoming an Immortal King, many divine powers and secret skills were condensed in the Grotto Heaven. As for the Grotto Heaven, it nourished the body and bloodline throughout the years. Therefore, the body and bloodline of an Immortal King contained the power of the Grotto Heaven and could release a shocking power with every move. For a fight between Grotto Heaven realm experts, it was a little like returning to nature and simplifying things. Although it seemed like it was a simple palm strike from Immortal King Long Knight, it contained the power of the Grotto Heaven. It vaguely sealed the void around the Marshal Dao Prime body, preventing him from dodging, and he could only take it head-on. The Marshal Dao Prime body was expressionless as he circulated his blood chi, letting out the deafening sound of raging tides. What strong blood chi! The surrounding Immortal Kings were secretly alarmed when they heard the sound of blood chi rising. How did desolate Marshal cultivate to such an extent before he even entered the Grotto Heaven realm? Could it be that this person had already condensed a Grotto Heaven and merely hid his aura without revealing it? Bang! The Marshal Dao Prime body punched out and collided with the palm of Immortal King Long Knight. Both parties shuddered. All right. The gaze of Immortal King Long Knight intensified as he attacked consecutively. The Marshal Dao Prime body was fearless as he stood in midair and counterattacked. Both parties clashed consecutively in midair and their fists and palms collided with a deafening bang, causing many cracks to appear in the void and the world to tremble. This was a fight between Immortal Kings. Even without the use of the Grotto Heaven, the void would still shake. Both parties clashed for more than 10 rounds and were evenly matched. Immortal King Long Knight narrowed his eyes slightly. As a supreme Immortal King, the Grotto Heaven had nourished his body and bloodline for hundreds of thousands of years. Even after launching consecutive attacks today, he could not gain any advantage against Desolate Marshal at all. Of course, he was only surprised but not nervous. The power released by Desolate Marshal earlier on was not enough to threaten him. Furthermore, he did not use his full strength. For Immortal King experts, the Grotto Heaven was their strongest technique. The other Immortal King experts such as Immortal King Qing Yang exchanged glances with smiles and relaxed expressions. Given the current situation, there was no need for them to attack. Immortal King Long Knight alone was enough to suppress Desolate Marshal. Long Knight, don't get entangled with him. Suppress him as soon as possible lest other variables appear. Immortal King Qing Yang said in a deep voice. All right. Immortal King Long Knight hollered and channeled his essence spirit to prop up his major Grotto Heaven. The void behind him suddenly collapsed and a dark void without any light appeared. That was his Long Night Grotto Heaven. In this Grotto Heaven, one would fall into a long night and it was difficult to see light. With the appearance of the major Grotto Heaven, the aura of Immortal King Long Knight surged and his combat strength rose as well. It's time to end things. Immortal King Long Knight said indifferently. He reached into the Grotto Heaven behind him and withdrew a pitch-black spear. A Grotto Heaven spirit treasure. After cultivators advanced to the Immortal King realm, their sentient dharmic treasures could also be placed into the Grotto Heaven and nourished by it. As time passed by, when the sentient dharmic treasure fused completely with the Grotto Heaven, they would transform into Grotto Heaven spirit treasures. Any Grotto Heaven spirit treasure would contain the dharmic Tao of the Grotto Heaven and was extremely powerful. Swoosh! Immortal King Long Knight supported his Grotto Heaven and strode forward. Waving the pitch-black spear in his hands, he stabbed towards the Marshal Dao Prime body with an apocalyptic might. The Marshal Dao Prime body had a calm expression and a green light flashed on his glabella. The Hell Suppression tripod appeared and was filled with an ancient aura as electric arcs coiled around it with an extraordinary might. When the Immortal Kings saw the Hell Suppression tripod, their eyes lit up. This was the weapon of Great Emperor Infinite in the past. More importantly, the Hell Suppression tripod was the key to controlling the infinite hell. There was no grotto heaven aura on the hell suppression tripod. This confirmed everyone's guess that desolate marshal of the fiend domain had not entered the grotto heaven realm at all. Many immortal kings glared at the hell suppression tripod with puzzled expressions, as though they had discovered something. The realm of the hell suppression tripod had fallen. After passing through the perfected one heavenly tribulation, it was merely at the level of a sentient dharmic treasure. But now, they could see remnant marks left behind by 10 heavenly tribulations on the hell suppression tripod. Could the legend be true? Did desolate marshal really attract the 10th heavenly tribulation? When the news spread, even the many immortal kings present scoffed and did not believe it, let alone Yahuwah and the other perfected immortals. After all, throughout history, there had never been a 10th tribulation since life was born in the upper world. At that moment, when the immortal kings saw the 10 burn marks on the hell suppression tripod with their own eyes, they vaguely realized that there was a high chance the rumors of the past were true. There was truly a 10th tribulation in the perfected one heavenly tribulation. Why were there no records of the 10th tribulation throughout history? Even people as talented as the great emperors of the past went through the 9 of 9 heavenly tribulation at the very most. Clang. Just as everyone's imagination was running wild, the pitch-black spear collided heavily against the hell suppression tripod and electric arcs flew everywhere. This time round, the martial Dao prime body retreated a few steps in succession. However, with the hell suppression tripod that had passed through the 10th tribulation, the martial Dao prime body still managed to defend against the accumulated attack of immortal King Long Night. Although the cultivation realm of the hell suppression tripod had fallen, it was an emperor weapon back then after all. Furthermore, it was the key to suppressing the infinite hell. Even the grotto heaven spirit treasure could not destroy it with ease. When immortal King Long Night saw that he could not suppress the martial Dao prime body even after summoning his major grotto heaven and grotto heaven spirit treasure, he had a terrible expression and could not help but harumph coldly before attacking once more. This time round, the blood chi of immortal King Long Night surged as he wielded his spear and attacked. The major grotto heaven carried endless might and suppressed the martial Dao prime body. He wanted to make use of his Long Night grotto heaven to devour desolate martial and refine him completely as nourishment for his grotto heaven. Chapter 2617, Chapter 2617, Unable to Devour. Chapter 2617, Unable to Devour. The everlasting night and boundless darkness crept forth. Instantly, the world went dark and the heavens lost its light. Immortal King Long Night used his grotto heaven spirit treasure to restrain the hell suppression tripod while the major grotto heaven behind him devoured the figure of the martial Dao prime body. It's all over. When the immortal kings saw that, they shook their heads gently. As long as desolate martial fell into the major grotto heaven of immortal King Long Night, he would be reduced to fish that could be slaughtered at will no matter how shocking his methods were. Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned worriedly. On the side of the fiend domain, Feng Kantian took a deep breath and suppressed his urge to attack, continuing to watch. The martial Dao prime body had repeatedly instructed him not to attack. He believed that the martial Dao prime body would not die so easily. In the Long Night grotto heaven, the gaze of the martial Dao prime body intensified. Purple flames burned in his eyes and his blood chi surged as he channeled his bloodline to its limits, releasing his bloodline phenomenon, the Heaven and Earth Furnace. Boom. The martial Dao prime body stood in the darkness and shone with an endless brilliance as flames surged into the skies. The flames included the martial spirit fire, tribulation fire, red lotus karmic fire, dragon phoenix flame and hellfire. Despite the buff of so many flames, he was still unable to go against the Long Night grotto heaven. However, it was also impossible for the Long Night grotto heaven to devour and refine the martial Dao prime body. For example, hellfire originated from Avicii. Due to the cultivation realm of the martial Dao prime body, its power was far inferior to when it was in Avicii. However, the Long Night grotto heaven could not refine it at all. Initially, the grotto heaven was dark and silent. However, after devouring the martial Dao prime body, a gigantic ball of flames appeared in the grotto heaven. Both parties were in a stalemate. The blood chi of the martial Tao prime body was strong, and even as time passed by, the flames burned furiously without stopping. However, the power of the Long Night Grotto Heaven was being depleted. When Immortal King Long Night sensed this, his expression darkened. On the battlefield, Heavenly King Luo Shun chanted a Buddhist proclamation softly and said, "Patron Long Night, you sure are capable. Your merits for killing perfected. Fiend Desolate Marshal are immeasurable. However, the Hell Suppression Tripod is a sacred item of the Buddhist monasteries. Patron Long Night, please return it to its rightful owner." Immortal King Qing Yang smiled gently. The Hell Suppression Tripod is an emperor weapon. It's said to be connected to the infinite hell and a taboo mystic classic. Fellow Daoist Luo Shen, you're not the only one. I believe everyone present is interested in the Hell Suppression Tripod. Immortal King Kai Ping said indifferently, the Hell Suppression Tripod no longer has an owner. Since we're all present, we can't hand it over to someone casually. The Immortal Kings present thought that Desolate Marshal would definitely die and had already begun to discuss the ownership of the Hell Suppression Tripod. Right then, a violent fluctuation came from the major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night. In the endless darkness, a flame appeared and intensified. Immediately after, the ball of flames fell onto the battlefield. In the flames, a figure stood. It was Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. The Immortal Kings frowned. What was going on? The Long Night Grotto Heaven failed to refine Desolate Marshal and spat him out instead? Sensing the gazes around him, Immortal King Long Night had a terrible expression as he grit his teeth. This fiend is in possession of strange dharmic Taos and controls many powerful flames. It's difficult to refine him. Amitabha. Heavenly King Luo Shen strode forward. Seems like I'm the only one who can subdue this fiend. When Heavenly King Luo Shen arrived before the martial Tao prime body, he summoned his major grotto heaven without a second word. A Buddhist light shone from within and auspicious clouds filled the skies, enveloping the martial Tao prime body. Thereafter, Heavenly King Luo Shen assumed a lotus position and hovered in midair. He held prayer beads in his hands and chanted Buddhist dharmic incantations softly. The dharmic incantations turned into golden runes that entered the major grotto heaven behind him. Before long, Heavenly King Luo Shen fiddled with the prayer beads in his hands faster and faster, and a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. A moment later, he suddenly stood up. A figure shrouded in flames flew out from the major grotto heaven that was filled with Buddhist light behind him. It was Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. It was not just the grotto heavens of the immortal sects, even the grotto heavens of the Buddhist monasteries could not refine the martial Tao prime body. Fu. The martial Tao prime body chuckled and surveyed his surroundings. His gaze swept past the faces of Immortal King Qing Yang and the others, and he mocked, "Is that all there is to the supreme immortal kings of the two domains? In my opinion, there's no need for you guys to hold the 9 firmament meet again in the future. It'll just be a joke." Fiend, how brazen, how arrogant. The immortal kings were enraged. Even the 20-odd supreme immortal kings of the two domains revealed sinister killing intent. At the Immortal King realm, one was almost at the peak of the upper world and could rule over millions of living beings. They could not withstand any humiliation or provocation. Furthermore, cultivators of both domains were gathered here and everyone was watching. If they could not suppress Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain, the immortal kings of the two domains would probably become jokes of the upper world after today. There were not many immortal kings who could remain calm. Immortal Queen Ling Long could tell that the words of the martial Tao prime body were clearly meant to anger many immortal kings present, including the supreme immortal kings. However, she truly could not figure out the meaning behind the actions of the martial Tao prime body. She could only guess the consequences of the actions of the martial Tao prime body. Initially, for the sake of their dignity, the supreme immortal kings present were embarrassed to join forces against a supreme perfected fiend. Now that they were provoked by the martial Tao prime body, there was a high chance that the 20-odd supreme immortal kings would join forces to suppress the martial Tao prime body in their rage. "Don't waste your breath on him." Immortal King Long Night grit his teeth and said, "This person's dharmic Tao is strange. Let's release our major grotto heavens and join forces to destroy him. Exactly. Heavenly King Luotian said in a deep voice, since I can't devour and refine this fiend, I can only crush his body and bloodline to purify him forcefully. Come on, let's see how much longer this fiend can last against our combined forces. Immortal King Qingyang expressed his stance as well. In the blink of an eye, 19 supreme immortal kings stood out and surrounded the martial Dao Prime body. The 19 supreme immortal kings released their major grotto heavens in unison. Instantly, the world changed. On the battlefield, 19 major grotto heavens with different dharmic Daos appeared and crushed towards the martial Dao Prime body with a terrifying aura. Immortal Queen Linglong's heart skipped a beat and she stood up instinctively. Under such circumstances, even if she was in his position, she would not be able to escape. The 19 major grotto heavens had already sealed all exits in all directions. Desolate Marshal might be able to avoid being devoured and refined by a grotto heaven due to some strange dharmic Dao, but there was no way he could defend against the suppression of 19 major grotto heaven. Immortal Queen Linglong had just seen it clearly. Although Desolate Marshal was not refined by Immortal King Long Night and Heavenly King Luotian's grotto heavens, he suffered quite a blow and his aura became much weaker. If the 19 major grotto heavens crushed over at the same time, there was only a single outcome for Desolate Marshal: his body and essence spirit would be destroyed. Chapter 2618, Chapter 2618, Success. Chapter 2618, Success. On the peak of the Builder Tree. Although Su Zimo looked calm, he was actually extremely nervous internally. Although the Green Lotus True Body was not involved and would not be implicated, the choice of the Martial Dao Prime Body meant that the Martial Dao Prime Body would cease to exist if he failed. Even so, it was worth the risk for the Martial Dao Prime Body to give it a shot. This choice was extremely important and would determine the future of the Martial Dao Prime Body. It was a path that no one could replicate. Although the Green Lotus True Body was in Heaven and Earth Academy, the inexplicable sense of danger had always existed. As his cultivation realm deepened and his combat strength became stronger, the sense of danger did not disappear. Instead, it intensified. Su Zimo needed the Martial Dao Prime Body to advance further and grow to a sufficiently strong level. On the one hand, the Martial Dao Prime Body could better protect Tianhuang's sect if he was stronger. On the other hand, if the Green Lotus True Body encountered any irreconcilable danger in the future, the Martial Dao Prime Body could become a way out for the Green Lotus True Body. There was also one more thing. The Martial Dao Prime Body intended to head to the Great Wilderness. If he was only at the true martial realm, he was still lacking in terms of strength. He had to become stronger so that he had the confidence and foundation to look for Dai Yu. He had to be qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with her. Beneath the Builder Tree, the 19 Supremes supported their major grotto heavens and trapped the Martial Dao Prime Body within. They launched their final attacks and crushed and collided continuously. The 19 major grotto heavens contained 19 different dharmic Daos and tempered the Martial Dao Prime Body continuously, letting out jarring sound. The true Martial Dao Body seemed like it could fall apart at any moment. At that time, the bones and flesh of the Martial Dao Prime Body would be crushed into dust. In less than a few breaths, the Martial Dao Prime Body could not hold on any longer. If it was just one or two major grotto heavens, he could still fight them temporarily with his bloodline phenomenon and the Heaven and Earth furnace. But now that the 19 major grotto heavens were gathered with dharmic Daos surging, even the true Martial Dao Body could not defend against it. Poof, poof, poof. Blood began to fill the body of the Martial Dao Prime Body and the true Martial Dao Body could not withstand the pressure. Under the suppression of the 19 major grotto heavens, his skin split, bones snapped, organs vibrated and his Dao Body was filled with a scarlet blood mist. Cough, cough, cough. The Martial Dao Prime Body coughed out large mouthfuls of blood as well. In reality, the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings had yet to use their full strength. At their cultivation realm, every single one of them had experienced countless life and death situations and had seen too many storms. They were extremely cautious. Although they attacked to suppress Desolate Marshal, most of their attention was focused in the direction of the Fiend Domain, afraid that anything could happen. Desolate Marshal's action looked reckless on the surface. They believed that he must have other trump cards up his sleeves to explain his baffling actions. The group of Supreme Immortal Kings were worried that Emperor Bo-Zun would be provoked if they suppressed Desolate Marshal. Of the 20-odd Supreme Immortal Kings, a few of them did not participate because they had such considerations as well. However, as time passed by, although the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings had already severely injured Desolate Marshal, the direction of the Fiend domain was still calm without any signs of Fiend cultivators, and everyone gradually relaxed. So, that's all to the power of Supreme Immortal Kings? Right then, the weak voice of the Marshal Dao Prime Body sounded. Desolate Marshal, you're still in the mood to mock us even now. You truly don't know what's good for you. Immortal King. Immortal King Long Night sneered and said in a deep voice, everyone, don't worry. Attack with all your might and kill this fiend. Destroy his essence, spirit and soul. That's right. Although Heavenly King Luo Shun was from the Buddhist monasteries, he was also murderous at the moment. The Hell Suppression Tripod would only become ownerless once more after Desolate Marshal was completely destroyed. That was the only way he could get his hands on it. Kill. The Supreme Immortal Kings hollered and channeled the Dharmic Daos of the Grotto Heavens with all their might. The power of the Grotto Heavens surged and suppressed the Marshal Dao Prime Body. This time round, the Marshal Dao Prime Body could no longer hold on. Bang! Boom! Accompanied by a loud bang, the true Marshal Dao Body exploded and his flesh was destroyed. A tremendous power tore through the void and a large area of the void caved in, forming a dark black hole. The terrifying power released by the 19 major Grotto Heavens not only destroyed the Marshal Dao Prime Body's physical body and essence spirit, it even penetrated a large void. The world returned to normal. The cultivators around the Builder Tree were dumbfounded as well with shocked expressions. The Fiend Domain's Desolate Marshal caused such a huge commotion at the 9 Firmament meet. He had just suppressed the paragons of the 2 ranking lists, killed the Supreme Arhat and defeated 7 Immortal Kings. He was fearless and arrogant, and now, he ended up in such a state where he was killed by the combined forces of 19 Supreme Immortal Kings without a corpse left. Not far away, Mo Qing seemed to have lost her soul when she saw that. Her face turned pale and her body swayed slightly, almost falling to the side. Thankfully, Yunju reacted in time and supported her hurriedly. Sigh. Yunju sighed gently and turned back to look in the direction of Su Zimo at the peak of the Builder Tree. This was Su Zimo's secret and she could not say it explicitly, nor did she know how to console him. He died just like that. Jun Yu had a conflicted expression and a lost look in her eyes. Her interaction with Desolate Marshal was brief and they only had a short exchange of blows. However, the impression left behind by Desolate Marshal was way too deep. Up till this point at her cultivation, Desolate Marshal was the first and only person who gave her the notion that she was helpless to resist. The existence of Desolate Marshal even made her feel despair. No matter how she cultivated, she would not be able to catch up to that person. Jun Yu did not have much prejudice towards the Fiend Domain and Fiend cultivators. She felt a deep sense of pity for Desolate Marshal's death. Mother, Desolate Marshal, died just like that. Lin Luo could not believe it and a look of sadness flashed through her eyes. Back when the siblings were trapped in Langfeng City, it was because of the appearance of Desolate Marshal that the 2 of them managed to escape. No matter where Desolate Marshal came from, he was their savior. Immortal Queen Ling Long sighed and shook her head gently, murmuring, should be dead. Even though Immortal Queen Ling Long could peer through the heavenly secrets, she could not figure out how Desolate Marshal could survive against the suppression of 19 major Grotto Heavens. Instinctively, she looked in the direction of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain's Su Zimo. At the same time, on the side of the Fiend Domain, Feng Kantian, Yang Beichen, Ming Zhan and Ji Yaoshua looked towards Su Zimo. Everyone who knew Desolate Marshal's true identity wanted an answer. Or rather, they were searching for a sliver of hope. At that moment, Su Zimo was staring fixedly at the dark void beneath the Builder Tree. His gaze intensified and a smile even appeared on his face. Success. If not for the fact that there were too many cultivators around, Su Zimo would have reared his head and howled. After the martial Tao Prime Body's body and essence spirit were destroyed by the 19 major grotto heavens, Su Zimo indeed lost the connection to the martial Tao Prime Body. However, it was only momentary. In just a few breaths, he sensed the aura of the martial Tao Prime Body once more. He could sense that the aura of the martial Tao Prime Body was initially weak. However, it expanded rapidly and became stronger at an unimaginable speed. An even more terrifying desolate martial was about to reappear. Chapter 2619, Chapter 2619, Tao Body and Tao Fruit. Chapter 2619, Tao Body and Tao Fruit. While the martial Tao Prime Body was in seclusion in Avicii, he did not stop deducing the dharmic formulation of the martial Tao. When he was about to come out of seclusion, he had already comprehended the key points and was only missing some details and opportunities. In other words, it was unrealistic for the martial Tao Prime Body to advance to the next realm of the martial Tao within a short period of time. However, at the same time, because he had smelted and browsed through too many ancient books and sutras, another thought flashed through the mind of the martial Tao Prime Body. Perhaps before he entered the next realm of the martial Tao, he could make use of another method to condense his grotto heaven first and become a fiend king. The appearance of the martial Tao Prime Body was a variable that was beyond the 3 realms and 5 elements. The Prime Body's existence originated from the martial Tao fruit. Ordinary Tao fruits condensed the dharmic Tao of cultivators and was the essence of their cultivation. There were countless inheritance secret skills and insights within. As for the martial Tao fruit, it condensed the essence of the martial Tao. It was not only a noble augmentation, it also contained the will of the martial Tao and the faith of all living beings. It was only through chance and the combination of various powers that a Tao fruit with life force was born. This was unprecedented and could not be replicated. Up till this point of his cultivation, the Prime Body had fused the martial Tao dharmic formulation into his bones and flesh at the true martial realm to temper the true martial Tao body. However, in reality, the true martial Tao body was also a Tao fruit. The Tao body was the Tao fruit and vice versa, the two were one. The martial Tao Prime Body was the only one throughout history to be in such a situation. It was recorded in the dharmic formulation of many inheritances that the prerequisite for condensing a grotto heaven was to shatter the Tao fruit. Through the tremendous power released by the shattering of the Tao fruit, the void outside the body would be smashed, creating a chamber that could connect to the heavens and the 3 realms that was the grotto heaven. The process was extremely dangerous. If the power accumulated after the Tao fruit was shattered was insufficient, and one could not support a grotto heaven, it would mean that the breakthrough had failed. They would either die or settle for second best and reach the half-step grotto heaven realm. Although their lifespans would increase, they would never be able to advance to the grotto heaven realm. The idea of the martial Tao Prime Body was to shatter the true martial Tao body. The true martial Tao body was the fruit of the martial Tao. The shattering of the true martial Tao body meant that the Tao fruit would be shattered. At the same time, there was a chance that a chamber could be opened up and a grotto heaven could be condensed. This grotto heaven would originate from the martial Tao Prime Body, but the martial Tao Prime Body was a variable to begin with. In other words, if this grotto heaven was born, there was a high chance that it would exist beyond the 3 realms and 5 elements, turning into a variant grotto heaven. That thought was way too terrifying. Even if an ordinary Tao fruit was shattered, the process of breaking through to the grotto heaven realm was extremely dangerous. For a variable like the martial Tao Prime Body, it was unknown if the true martial Tao body would truly break through to the grotto heaven realm after shattering, just like a Tao fruit. If he failed, the martial Tao Prime Body would not even have the chance to settle for second best and enter the half-step grotto heaven realm. 4 ordinary perfected immortals to advance to the grotto heaven realm, they merely had to shatter their Tao fruits. However, what the martial Tao Prime Body had to shatter was the true martial Tao body that he had condensed with his dharmic Tao. If he failed, his essence, spirit and soul would be destroyed. Furthermore, his true martial Tao body had already been cultivated to the perfected stage, and every single move he made could even break through the minor grotto heavens of ordinary immortal king. Even ordinary grotto heaven spirit treasures could not injure his body. How could such a true martial Tao body be shattered? It was an idea fraught with difficulties and a slim chance of survival. After pondering for a long time, the martial Tao prime body decided to take the risk. Although it was a risk, he was not unprepared. First, he could only rely on external forces to break through the true martial Tao body. Yet, the external force could not be too strong. If an emperor were to release the power of the world and destroy the true martial Tao body, even his dharmic Tao would be destroyed and refined. There was no need to talk about condensing a grotto heaven. He would be killed into nothingness before anything could be formed. The safest option was for supreme immortal kings to make use of the power of their major grotto heavens to destroy the true martial Tao body bit by bit. Furthermore, one supreme immortal king was not enough, there had to be at least 10 of them. Second, after the true martial Tao body was shattered, there was actually still a sliver of hope of revival. The bloodline of the true martial Tao body contained the blood of the dragon phoenix. Therefore, the body of the martial Tao prime body contained the final innate divine power of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, the power of the phoenix nirvana. However, it was far from enough if he was merely relying on this innate divine power alone. The phoenix nirvana had a 90% chance of failure to begin with. Furthermore, this innate divine power might not be able to unleash its full potential against the suppression of major grotto heavens. Third and most importantly, the trajectory of his deduction had to be correct. The true martial Tao body had to be the Tao fruit such that the destruction of the Tao body could truly shatter the void and condense a grotto heaven. All in all, the 9 firmament meet was the best opportunity for the martial Tao prime body to give this idea a shot. There were enough supreme immortal kings at the 9 firmament meet. Furthermore, the venue of the 9 firmament meet was near the builder tree. Once a huge battle broke out and his true martial Tao body was shattered to evolve into a grotto heaven, this grotto heaven could devour and absorb the life force of the builder tree to extend his life. Beneath the builder tree, Immortal King Qingyang and the other 18 supreme immortal kings observed the fiend domain for any activity after they destroyed Desolate Martial's body and essence spirit. They only heaved a sigh of relief when they did not find anything unusual. Immortal King Long Night sneered, "Desolate Martial is so arrogant that I thought he had something up his sleeves. To think that he's just an idiot who doesn't know his place. Foo-foo." Immortal King Qingyang chuckled. This lad went on a massacre in the Jade Firmament Immortal domain before escaping back to Avicii. He really thinks that he can do whatever he wants just because he has the Hell Suppression Tripod. He didn't know that once we joined forces to seal the void, his Hell Suppression Tripod would end up as a display piece. At the mention of the Hell Suppression Tripod, the gazes of the Supreme Immortal Kings landed near the pierced void where the Hell Suppression Tripod hovered. Amitabha. Heavenly King Luo Shun chanted his Buddhist proclamations softly and made a move first, arriving before the Hell Suppression Tripod to snatch it away. "Monk Luo Shun, aren't you way too anxious?" Immortal King Qingyang and the others made a move one after another as well. The 19 major grotto heavens were propped up once more and collided in midair. "Hold on. Stop first." Suddenly, Heavenly King Luo Shun frowned and hollered. "Why? What are you up to, monk?" Immortal King Kai Ping sneered, "The void here has already been sealed. No one can dream of leaving until we resolve the matter of the Hell Suppression Tripod." Heavenly King Luo Shun said hurriedly, "There's something strange about this Hell Suppression Tripod. I can't lift it. How is that possible?" In a flash, Immortal King Long Night arrived beside the Hell Suppression Tripod and reached out to grab it. The Hell Suppression Tripod did not budge at all, as though it was sucked in by the dark black hole behind it. It was only at that moment that the Immortal Kings noticed something unusual. "Why hasn't this void healed after so long?" Immortal King Qingyang narrowed his eyes and asked. Although a fight between immortal kings could shatter the void, due to the circulation of heaven and earth laws, the void would recover quickly and recover to its original state. But now, the pitch-black void had yet to recover. The immortal kings glared at the dark black hole not far away and their gazes froze. Suddenly, their expressions changed. In the depths of the black hole, a figure appeared faintly, as though it was one with the black hole. You'll have to ask for my permission if you want to snatch my tripod. A shocking voice sounded from the black hole. Chapter 2620 Chapter 2620 Grotto Heaven Transformation, Supreme Suppression. Chapter 2620 Grotto Heaven Transformation, Supreme Suppression. That voice. The immortal kings glared at the dark void not far away with bewildered expressions. The immortals and monks around the builder tree were dumbfounded with a look of disbelief on their faces. Desolate Marshal. That was the voice of Desolate Marshal from the Fiend domain. How was that possible? Hadn't Desolate Marshal's body and essence spirit been destroyed by the combined forces of 19 supreme immortal kings? Even the void was penetrated, but Desolate Marshal was still alive. Mo Qing had a delighted expression and clenched her fists instinctively. She looked at the figure that gradually appeared in the dark void and did not dare to look away. It was as though she was afraid that the figure would disappear once more. Yunzhu heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Su Zimo, who was on the peak of the builder tree, with a hint of reproach. He seems to have become stronger. Junyu looked at the dark void and murmured softly. On the side of the Fiend domain. Feng Kantian and the others finally relaxed and smiled. Although Desolate Marshal was only the Marshal Dao prime body, if he were to die, there might be a huge commotion in Tianhuang sect as well. On the peak of the builder tree, Immortal Queen Ling Long heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that Desolate Marshal was fine. However, she looked at the dark void with a confused expression. Even with her experience and knowledge, she could not see through the dharmic formulation used by the Marshal Dao prime body to revive. She could only roughly determine that after this change, the Marshal Dao prime body had already created a grotto heaven that was unique to him. Beneath the builder tree, the Marshal Dao prime body wore a silver mask and walked out slowly from the dark void. He wore purple robes and looked no different from before. However, Immortal King Qingyang and the others could clearly sense that Desolate Marshal had turned even more terrifying. They could sense the aura of a grotto heaven from Desolate Marshal. Grotto Heaven Realm? The immortal kings frowned with grim expressions. The dark grotto heaven on Desolate Marshal's body fluctuated sinisterly, as though it was one with him and was faintly visible. How could this be? The immortal kings were puzzled and did not attack rashly out of caution. The grotto heaven conjured by Desolate Marshal seemed to be extremely different from the grotto heaven they knew. Under normal circumstances, the shattering of a cultivator's Dao fruit should happen outside of their bodies. After all, a shattered Dao fruit would release such a tremendous power that it could even penetrate the void. If it was placed in one's body, it would be enough to blow it up to ashes. One would die even before they could condense a grotto heaven. In other words, when cultivators advanced to the immortal king realm, their grotto heavens were condensed outside their bodies. Although the grotto heavens were outside their bodies, it was closely related to them. They could make use of the grotto heavens to connect to the heavens and absorb heaven and earth essence chi. However, Desolate Marshal's grotto heaven seemed to be within his body. A grotto heaven that was within his body? In reality, the grotto heaven of the Marshal Dao prime body was not outside or within his body. To be precise, the Marshal Dao prime body was the grotto heaven. The new Marshal Dao prime body was already one with this grotto heaven. The Marshal Dao prime body had reappeared in the world after transforming into a grotto heaven. In terms of the Marshal Dao, the prime body was still at the true martial realm and the level of a perfected true Marshal Dao body. However, the prime body made use of the uniqueness of the true Marshal Dao body and used another method to condense a grotto heaven first to become a fiend king. That was because his Dao body was his Dao fruit. Therefore, this was a path that no one else could replicate. Immortal King Long Night narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Desolate Marshal, you are indeed capable to be able to survive. From the looks of it, you seem to have benefited from this misfortune." Amitabha. Heavenly King Luotian said slowly, "Since Desolate Marshal is still alive, we'll just kill him once more." "That's right." With just a few words, the 19 supreme immortal kings propped up their major grotto heavens once more and charged towards the Marshal Dao prime body with an aura of aggressiveness. "You still want to kill me?" The martial Tao Prime body looked at the 19 supreme immortal kings charging over and shook his head gently, saying indifferently, "You guys are way too naive." The moment he said that, the martial Tao Prime body counterattacked as well. Without any unnecessary movements, he punched towards the incoming Heavenly King Luo Shun. Not only did that punch contain the dharmic formulation of the martial Tao, it also contained the power of this new grotto heaven. Boom! The fist of the martial Tao Prime body collided with Heavenly King Luo Shun's major grotto heaven. In reality, this was also a collision between the grotto heaven of the martial Tao Prime body and Heavenly King Luo Shun's major grotto heaven. The world trembled as though it was letting out a tragic cry. Both parties were caught in a stalemate in midair for a moment, and Heavenly King Luo Shun's expression changed. His major grotto heaven could not hold on any longer, and faint cracks started appearing, threatening to collapse at any moment. How is that possible? Desolate Marshal has only just formed a grotto heaven, so it should merely be a minor grotto heaven. Yet, my major grotto heaven is unable to defend against it. Heavenly King Luo Shun was shocked and furious. The reason why the martial Tao Prime body could release such an attack was not only because of a minor grotto heaven. The reason for his terrifying might was the combination of his perfected true martial Tao body and the minor grotto heaven. Alongside his first punch, the martial Tao Prime body continued releasing punches in succession. There were a total of 19 for the 19 immortal kings present. At the perfected true martial realm, the martial Tao Prime body could suppress the minor grotto heaven immortal kings. Now that the martial Tao Prime body had transformed into a grotto heaven and controlled the power of the grotto heaven realm, his combat strength had increased exponentially and he could completely suppress the supreme immortal kings present. The moment he transformed into the grotto heaven, the situation of the battle had changed completely. Boom! 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 A series of explosions shook the world. The void beneath the builder tree tore continuously. The grotto heavens of the 19 supreme immortal kings were shaken and shattered by the martial Tao Prime body. They could not defend against it at all. How can he be so strong? The 19 supreme immortal kings were shocked. Although the supreme immortal kings surrounded the martial Tao Prime body in the middle, in reality, they were already facing a situation where they could collapse at any moment. As long as one of them was afraid and chose to retreat, the other supreme immortal kings might withdraw as well. The 19 supreme immortal kings were still hesitant. Desolate Marshal had just entered the grotto heaven realm after all, while they had been famous for a long time. Furthermore, it was a situation of 19 supreme immortal kings against him. It was truly not good for them to retreat just like that. While immortal King Qingyang and the others were hesitating, the martial Tao Prime body did not give them much time to think. Devour! The martial Tao Prime body opened his grotto heaven and hollered softly. His figure seemed to have vanished and a gigantic and strange grotto heaven appeared in midair. It spun continuously and tore apart the 19 surrounding major grotto heavens. Against the counterattack of the martial Tao Prime body, the 19 major grotto heavens were already on the verge of collapse. Now that they were affected by this tremendous suction power, they could not hold on at all and collapse completely. An endless stream of grotto heaven power was devoured by the dark grotto heaven of the martial Tao Prime body. Some of the damaged grotto heaven fragments were even devoured by the dark grotto heaven of the martial Tao Prime body. Ordinary grotto heavens could reach the heavens and connect to the three realms. They could absorb the essence qi in the world wildly, remove the impurities and refine them, allowing the grotto heavens to gradually grow. However, the grotto heaven of the martial Tao Prime body was a variable to begin with and was already beyond the three realms. It was also difficult for this grotto heaven to grow by absorbing heaven and earth essence qi. It could only transform by devouring other grotto heavens to absorb and refine their dharmic Taos. Chapter 26-21, Chapter 26-21, Peerless Ferocity, Chapter 26-21, Peerless Ferocity. Immortal King Qingyang and the others suddenly realized that the grotto heavens that they had condensed were being devoured by the dark grotto heaven that Desolate Marshal had transformed into. Their major grotto heavens were being torn apart. The immortal kings were shocked. Desolate Marshall's grotto heaven could devour their major grotto heavens. Throughout history, there had been countless paragons and monster incarnates. There were also some monster incarnates who cultivated unprecedented and terrifying grotto heavens that possessed devouring powers. However, even those grotto heavens could only devour the divine powers, secret skills, grotto heaven powers, divine weapons, or dharmic treasures of others. There had never been any immortal king who could devour the grotto heavens of other immortal kings whole like Desolate Marshall. All of their grotto heavens contained the profoundness of their cultivations. It could be said that every immortal king was practically the god within their grotto heavens. Devouring the grotto heaven of the other party meant that he wanted to devour the dharmic Tao contained in the grotto heaven. However, the dharmic Tao in every grotto heaven was different. If one devoured another person's dharmic Tao into their grotto heaven forcefully, it would mean that an intense dharmic Tao conflict would break out within his grotto heaven. This was equivalent to shifting the battlefield into his grotto heaven. If he could not suppress it, his grotto heaven would explode and his cultivation would vanish into thin air before the other party even attack. In the top auction houses and trading houses of the upper world, there would indeed be some priceless treasures such as the grotto heaven fragments of fallen immortal kings. Those grotto heaven fragments contained the dharmic Taos of the fallen immortal kings. For some grotto heaven realm experts, they could make use of a long period of time to gradually digest and smelt such grotto heaven fragments to comprehend the dharmic Taos without much conflict. However, the way Desolate Marshall was forcefully devouring their grotto heavens was an unprecedented and frenzied act. Furthermore, Desolate Marshall was not only devouring a single major grotto heaven of one supreme immortal king, he wanted to devour 19 major grotto heavens of 19 supreme immortal kings in one go. Aren't you afraid of biting off more than you can chew? Immortal King Long Night shouted with a furious expression. They were still alive and in their peak condition. The grotto heavens did not only contain their dharmic Taos, but also their powerful wills. Desolate Marshall was way too domineering and unreasonable. Not only did he want to devour their dharmic Taos, he wanted to subdue their wills as well. Heavenly King Luo Shun channeled his essence spirit and the major grotto heaven behind him shone with a Buddhist light that was filled with a blinding golden radiance. Since this fiend wants to die, let's fulfill his wish. The 19 supreme immortal kings channeled their blood chi and forced themselves to hold on to their major grotto heavens while continuing to exert pressure on the Marshall Tao Prime body. The figure of the Marshall Tao Prime body was faintly visible in his dark grotto heaven. He did not repel any of the 19 major grotto heavens and devoured them with all his might. If it was an ordinary grotto heaven, it would indeed not be able to devour the grotto heaven of other immortal kings directly. However, the grotto heaven of the Marshall Tao Prime body was a variable and was not within the three realms or restricted by the laws of this world. The grotto heaven of the Marshall Tao Prime body could not refine 19 major grotto heavens in a short period of time. However, his grotto heaven was like a bottomless abyss that could absorb everything. He would first absorb the dharmic Taos of the 19 major grotto heavens forcefully before refining them slowly in the future. Both parties were only in a stalemate for a moment. The expressions of immortal King Qingyang and the others turned terrible. When Desolate Marshall devoured their different dharmic Taos, his dark grotto heaven did not explode. Instead, it became even more terrifying. The radius of the grotto heaven became larger and its devouring power was even stronger. Immortal King Qingyang and the others could clearly sense the dharmic Taos contained in their grotto heavens weakening alongside their strength. If this continued, their hundreds of thousands of years of cultivation might be devoured by Desolate Marshall. In fact, their major grotto heavens might even drop in cultivation realm and be relegated to become minor grotto heavens. This was a loss that they could not endure. Retreat. That thought flashed through the mind of immortal King Qingyang. He could not let this drag on any longer. Otherwise, their major grotto heavens would be devoured cleanly before Desolate Marshall's grotto heaven even exploded. He had to leave as soon as possible while he still had the strength to break free. Desolate Marshall's dharmic Tao was way too evil. The only people who could suppress him were probably peak immortal kings with perfected grotto heavens. At that thought, Immortal King Qing-yang retreated and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, hold on first. I'll send a message to Divine Firmament Palace." The moment the Immortal King Qing-yang retreated, the other Supreme Immortal Kings retreated before he could finish. The combined forces of the 19 Supreme Immortal Kings dissipated instantly. The figure of the martial Tao Prime body reappeared and many mysterious and terrifying dharmic Taos spewed from his body, transforming into countless blinding runes that circled around him as his aura surged. His gaze was burning as he locked onto the aura of Immortal King Long Night. Instantly, he closed in and punched forward, tearing through the air. The major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night was torn into pieces by the martial Tao Prime body and its aura was weak. Right now, it could not defend against this forceful punch of the martial Tao Prime body at all. Bang! Boom! That punch was earth-shaking. The major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night collapsed completely. The fist of the martial Tao Prime body charged right in and broke through the major grotto heaven of Immortal King Long Night. The fist still had strength left and struck the chest of Immortal King Long Night. The overwhelming and terrifying power shattered the body of Immortal King Long Night instantly. Blood filled the air. The immortals and monks on the peak of the Builder Tree were shocked and horrified. Immortal King Long Night was not an ordinary immortal king, but a supreme immortal king with a major grotto heaven. But now, his body was shattered by a single punch from Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. The other 18 supreme immortal kings had wary expressions and did not dare to advance. If that was the case for the supreme immortal kings, the remaining 100-odd ordinary immortal kings were even more afraid of attacking. The Fiend Domain's Desolate Marshal had just condensed his grotto heaven, but he was already so domineering and ferocious. He suppressed the immortal kings of the two domains until they could not raise their heads and dodged him. The reason why the martial Tao Prime body targeted Immortal King Long Night was not because they had any deep feud. It was because the Grand Pure Jade Manual was now in the hands of Immortal King Long Night. As a supreme immortal king, Immortal King Long Night had expected that his body and bloodline would not be able to withstand the punch of the martial Tao Prime body. The moment the fist of the martial Tao Prime body descended, his essence spirit attached itself to the Grand Pure Jade Manual and fled into the distance with a ball of essence blood. Indeed, his body was shattered by a single punch from the martial Tao Prime body, the tremendous power charged towards his essence spirit and essence blood. However, it was dissipated by the power of the seal on the Grand Pure Jade Manual. Immortal King Long Night made use of the essence blood to condense his body rapidly and tear through the void, prepared to escape back to the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain. The martial Tao Prime body chased relentlessly like a shadow. The moment Immortal King Long Night tore through the void, the martial Tao Prime body had already caught up to him. Right then, a change happened. Chapter 2622, 2622 Awakening of the Builder Tree. 2622 Awakening of the Builder Tree. In the deep void torn apart by Immortal King Long Night, an evil power suddenly burst forth. A ghastly green light flashed and disappeared, entering the glabella of Immortal King Long Night. The attention of Immortal King Long Night was entirely focused on the martial Tao Prime body chasing after him. He had not expected that a fatal killing intent would be hidden in the void before him. At the same time, he had not expected that apart from Desolate Marshal, there was someone else who would dare to kill him at the Nine Firmament meet. Immortal King Long Night was in a state of panic to begin with after being hunted by the martial Tao Prime body. Coupled with the fact that he was caught off guard, he was killed by the ghastly green light that suddenly flashed through the depths of the void. A supreme immortal king died on the spot. The immortal kings were shocked. Up till this point of the Nine Firmament meet, although the cultivators on the perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings suffered immense losses and even the Supreme Arhat was killed by Desolate Marshal, no Immortal King expert died. The death of an Immortal King was extremely important. Furthermore, a Supreme Immortal King had died. In fact, an Emperor might be activated with the death of a Supreme Immortal King. The martial Tao Prime body frowned slightly and suddenly stopped in his tracks. He felt an extremely dangerous aura from the existence hidden in the deep void. There was a high chance that this expert had already surpassed the Grotto Heaven realm and was at the Emperor realm. That was also the reason why he could kill Immortal King Long Night cleanly before disappearing rapidly. Who was this person? How long had he been here? Was it an enemy of Immortal King Long Night? Was he here for the Grand Pure Jade Manual, or were there some other reasons? What puzzled the Martial Dao Prime body the most was that the ghastly green aura seemed familiar and made him feel extremely disgusted. Could it be the witch race? At the level of an immortal king, it was already difficult for them to die. The fact that the intruder could kill Immortal King Long Night so cleanly was proof of how terrifying his methods were. The Martial Dao Prime body did not continue chasing, he had completely lost track of the mysterious expert's aura. This person laid in ambush here and vanished after killing Immortal King Long Night, as though he had never appeared. His spirit perception warned him repeatedly. He could not linger here. Even without the reminder of his spirit perception, the Martial Dao Prime body was prepared to retreat. Not far behind him, a powerful life form was awakening. The Builder Tree. Perhaps due to the commotion of the 9 firmament meet or for some other reason, the Builder Tree had already awakened in advance. Given the power of the Builder Tree, apart from emperors, all the Immortal King experts present had to avoid it. Furthermore, there was a high chance that the death of Immortal King Long Night would alarm the Immortal Emperor of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain. Even with the current capabilities of the Martial Dao Prime body, he could not take on an Emperor expert head-on. He had already achieved his goal of using the Supreme Immortal Kings to shatter his true Martial Dao body. There was no need for him to linger here. Hurry and leave. Return to Tianhuang's sect immediately. Before the Martial Dao Prime body left, he sent a voice transmission to Feng Kantian using his spirit consciousness. Feng Kantian had been paying attention to the commotion the entire time and had already sensed the violent aura released by the Builder Tree. Once this ancient divine tree was awakened, it did not matter if one was from the 9 firmament immortal domain, pure land of bliss or fiend domain. Within its territory, any living being that barged in would be viewed by it as an anomaly, a provocation, and threat. When Feng Kantian heard the voice transmission from the Martial Dao Prime body, he was extremely decisive and tore through the void, bringing Yang Beichen, Ming Zhan, and the others into the spatial tunnel and disappearing. On the other side, the Builder Tree was completely awakened and released a violent life force. As though they could sense the living beings around them, thick branches danced like green anacondas. They were filled with a resplendent glow and fell into a frenzied rage. Piak, piak, piak. A few branches swept past and whipped the crowd of more than 100 Immortal King experts. Instantly, more than 10 Immortal Kings were sent flying and their bodies exploded. An Immortal King released his Grotto Heaven, but it was shattered by a tree branch and collapsed instantly. Ordinary Immortal Kings were helpless against the Builder Tree. If that was the case for Immortal Kings, all the perfected Immortals and Arhats present would have to die once all the branches of the Builder Tree started flailing. Retreat. Immortal King Qingyang let out a long howl. Even with his capabilities, he could not care about too many people. He could only bring the 3 great fairies and the other perfected immortal paragons of the divine firmament immortal domain who were closest to him to break through the void, prepared to escape back to the divine firmament immortal domain. As for the thousands of perfected immortals of the divine firmament immortal domain on the peak of the Builder Tree, he could not care less about them. Immortal Queen Ling Long was on the peak of the Builder Tree the entire time and did not descend. At that moment, she brought Lin Lei and Lin Luo with her and shifted her gaze towards Su Zimo. She sent a voice transmission with her spirit consciousness. Don't worry, I'll take you out of here first. All the Immortal Kings could not care less and could only bring along the perfected Immortals and Arhats around them. They shattered the void one after another, prepared to escape from this place. However, right then, a gigantic green halo burst forth from the body of the Builder Tree and spread rapidly, enveloping the surrounding 50 kilometers. The voids that were broken by the Immortal Kings were repaired instantly under the envelopment of the green halo, and the spatial tunnels vanished as well. The voids healed and the spatial tunnels were gone, leaving the cultivators of the 2 domains stranded. Pest! The Immortal Kings gasped and were secretly alarmed. What was this Builder Tree trying to do? Was this divine tree trying to keep them all here and start a massacre? Initially, the martial Tao prime body could have left right away. However, he suddenly paused when he saw the green halo emitted by the builder tree. Unlike the panic and fear of others, the martial Tao prime body looked at the green halo and seemed to have thought of something. Purple flames danced in his eyes as he pondered. Piak! A tree branch was flung down and tore through the void wildly, smashing onto the builder tree mountain range, causing the entire mountain range to collapse. Dozens of perfected immortals and arhats on the mountain range, who could not dodge in time, were whipped to death by the builder tree's branch. Their essence, spirits and souls were destroyed. As for the thousands of thick branches on the builder tree, they were already raised and could descend at any moment. At that time, even the entire builder tree mountain range might be destroyed, let alone the many perfected immortals and arhats present. Most likely, only the immortal king experts could escape from the attack range of the builder tree with the help of their movement techniques. Everyone else was going to die here. The paragons and monster incarnates of the two domains were gathered at the 9 firmament meet this time round. If the perfected immortals and arhats of the two domains were to die here, it would cause irreparable losses for the 9 firmament immortal domain and pure land of bliss. The current situation had already spiraled out of hand and was beyond the control of the immortal kings. Now that the builder tree had awakened in advance, all the immortal kings only wanted to protect themselves and escape from this place. None of them could care about the martial Tao prime body anymore. Right then, an unstoppable might came from the direction of the 9 firmament immortal domain and enveloped the builder tree. On the other side, in the direction of the pure land of bliss, a resplendent and divine golden light passed through the layers of clouds and tore through the firmaments, scattering down and dissipating the green halo around the builder tree. Chapter 26-23, 26-23 Appearance of Emperors. 26-23 Appearance of Emperors. In the direction of the 9 firmament immortal domain, a figure with a terrifying aura appeared slowly. It seemed to be looking down on the world and was unparalleled, emitting an endless might. Against such a majestic might, even the immortal kings and heavenly kings present could not defend against it, let alone the perfected immortals and arhat. An immortal emperor had appeared. Su Zimo focused his gaze. The facial features of this immortal emperor were similar to Prince Qin Ce. If he was not wrong, this should be Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament stood in midair and his tremendous might faced the builder tree from afar, blocking the thousands of branches temporarily, as though he was communicating with something. However, the builder tree had already fallen into a berserk state and did not give Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament any face at all, releasing an even more terrifying might. The thousands of branches of the builder tree broke free from the control of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament instantly and enveloped in the direction of the builder tree mountain range. The builder tree's thousands of thick branches were lush and covered the skies. A large shadow enveloped down in a suffocating manner. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament's expression was terrible. Even with his combat strength, he could not fight against the enraged builder tree. In a flash, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament made a decision. Waving his robes, he protected the cultivators of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain and retreated into the distance. Given his strength, if he chose to protect all the cultivators from the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain and pure land of bliss at the peak of the builder tree, he would definitely be severely injured by the builder tree as well. As an immortal emperor in charge of an entire immortal domain, there was no way he would take that risk. It was already extremely benevolent of him to protect the immortals of the Grand Firmament Immortal Domain. When the other cultivators of the two domains saw that, they quickly realized the intentions of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament. All of them had been heartlessly abandoned. The immortals and monks were indignant. However, although they harbored resentment, they did not dare to offend Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament in any way. Furthermore, they would not get the chance either. The attack of the builder tree had already descended and cultivators of the two domains on the peak of the builder tree were about to die on the spot. Right then, the blinding golden light in the direction of the pure land of bliss shifted rapidly and shone on the immortals and monks on the peak of the builder tree through the gaps in the leaves. Everyone seemed to be covered in a layer of sacred gold foil that shone brightly. Bang! Boom! Thousands of branches smashed down with a series of deafening bangs. The Builder Tree mountain range beneath everyone had already collapsed completely. However, the immortals and monks were shrouded by a layer of divine golden light that blocked most of the damage released by the Builder Tree. Unknowingly, a middle-aged monk was shielding everyone from the Builder Tree alone, protecting all of them. An emperor of the Buddhist monasteries had descended. Compared to the Builder Tree, the middle-aged monk seemed incomparably tiny. His body was not even as thick as a branch of the Builder Tree. However, at that moment, to everyone, the back view of the middle-aged monk seemed extremely tall and mighty. It was especially so when they compared him to Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament. The difference was obvious. Patrons, hurry and retreat. I won't be able to hold on for much longer. The middle-aged monk's body swayed slightly and his voice turned hoarse, as though he had suffered quite a blow. The immortals and monks seemed to have woken up from a dream as they hurriedly circulated their movement techniques and fled into the distance. The golden light of the middle-aged monk destroyed the green halo released by the Builder Tree previously. This meant that the immortal king experts could tear through the void and leave this place at any moment. When the martial Dao Prime body saw the two emperors appear, he did not dare to hesitate and tore through the void hurriedly, entering a spatial tunnel. Thereafter, he summoned the Hell Suppression Tripod rapidly and guarded it behind him before glancing in the direction of the middle-aged monk. As an emperor expert, there was naturally a chance that the middle-aged monk might attack him. The reason why he summoned the Hell Suppression Tripod was to prevent any accidents. For some unknown reason, perhaps because the middle-aged monk was too busy facing the Builder Tree or because he was injured and was unwilling to bother about the martial Dao Prime body. In any case, from the moment the martial Dao Prime body tore through the void to the moment he left this place, the middle-aged monk did not attack him. However, the moment the martial Dao Prime body turned back and looked at the middle-aged monk, he realized that the latter was looking at him as well. Their eyes met. For some unknown reason, the martial Dao Prime body suddenly felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. The middle-aged monk had handsome features and a benevolent expression that left a favorable impression. However, the martial Dao Prime body was certain that he had never seen this person before. How could that be? Where did that sense of familiarity come from? The martial Dao Prime body was not the only one. The Green Lotus True body was also reminiscing. Su Zimo believed that the sense of familiarity that flashed through the martial Dao Prime body's mind earlier on was definitely not without reason. The cultivators of the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and Pure Land of Bliss made use of the time bought by the middle-aged monk to finally escape from the attack range of the Builder Tree. The cultivators had pale expressions as they looked in the direction of the Builder Tree with lingering fear. If not for the appearance of the emperor of the Buddhist monasteries, everyone present would have been buried at the peak of the Builder Tree beneath the rubble, as expected of someone from the Buddhist monasteries. He's compassionate and sacrificed himself to save others. He's truly on a different level from us. Impressive. That's right. This accomplished monk saved all of us. We shall definitely remember this life-saving grace and repay him till our deaths. I wonder who this emperor of the Buddhist monasteries is. What's his dharmic title? After escaping, many cultivators looked at the middle-aged monk in the distance and could not help but discuss softly. Zen Master Hui Wen pondered for a moment and said thoughtfully, "This senior looks like Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma." After the middle-aged monk appeared, his back was facing the immortals and monks and no one could see him clearly. Before long, the middle-aged monk escaped unscathed from the Builder Tree and arrived here. Everyone could clearly see that the kasaya on the middle-aged monk's chest was stained with blood. It was clear that he was injured after fighting against the Builder Tree. It's truly Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Zen Master Hui Wen's heart skipped a beat when he saw the middle-aged monk. Delighted, he hurried forward and clasped his palms together, bowing. "Greetings, Senior 6 Brahma." He was not the only one. A few other heavenly kings of the Buddhist monasteries recognized the middle-aged monk and hurried forward to greet him as well. They were surprised and delighted with deep respect in their eyes. When the other monks saw that, they no longer had any doubts and knelt down hurriedly with elated expressions, chanting the name of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled a piece of information that Liu Ping had told him back in Heaven and Earth Academy. It was said that after Emperor Bo-Zun appeared and killed a few heavenly kings in succession, he disappeared and only Heavenly King 6 Brahma survived. Heavenly King 6 Brahma was enlightened after the calamity. He advanced courageously in Buddhism and became an emperor, now known as Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. This accomplished monk even opened a forum in the Buddhist monasteries to preach sutras and spread Dharmic Tao widely. He attracted countless Buddhist monks and had a huge impact in recent years. Su Zimo frowned and fell into deep thought. It was a nagging feeling, as though he had neglected something. Chapter 26-24, 26-24 Bo-Zun's Ambition. 26-24 Bo-Zun's Ambition. At that moment, Su Zimo was not standing with the cultivators of the divine firmament Immortal domain. Instead, he was standing beside Immortal Queen Linglong. Immortal Queen Linglong did not notice Su Zimo's abnormality. Instead, she looked in the direction of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma and lamented, as expected of an accomplished monk from the Buddhist monasteries of the Pure Land of Bliss. It's admirable that he can be so magnanimous. That's right. At the side, Lin Luo whispered as well, compared to this accomplished monk, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament is far inferior. It's not merely in terms of their levels as human beings. The cultivation realm of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma seems to be above Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament as well. Immortal Queen Ling Long pondered for a moment. Yes. I heard that this senior has just entered the Emperor realm not long ago. The fact that he's able to cultivate to this point is admirable indeed. Su Zimo was in deep thought and tried his best to recall. When he heard the words of Immortal Queen Ling Long, a thought flashed through his mind. Pest. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he gasped. He finally recalled why the martial Tao Prime body felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity when he saw Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. It was because the martial Tao Prime body had experienced that familiarity from Emperor Bo-Zun before. Initially, Su Zimo had not connected Emperor Bo-Zun to Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma of the Pure Land of Bliss. However, at that moment, when he recalled the information Liu Ping told him and what Immortal Queen Ling Long had just said, everything seemed to make sense. Back when Emperor Bo-Zun appeared, the heavenly kings of the Buddhist monasteries that surrounded him died, including the true Heavenly King 6 Brahma. The reason why Heavenly King 6 Brahma did not die was because the Heavenly King 6 Brahma that appeared later on was transformed by Emperor Bo-Zun. Others might not have the ability, but Emperor Bo-Zun cultivated both the Buddhism and Fiend Taos. Many years ago, he had already achieved extremely deep attainments in Buddhism. Now that he had broken free from Avicii, his comprehension of Buddhism had probably reached an unimaginable realm. If Emperor Bo-Zun were to transform into a Buddha, apart from a great emperor, there was probably no one else who could see through him. That could also explain why Emperor Bo-Zun seemed to have vanished from the world after he appeared and there was no news of him in the Fiend domain. That was because Emperor Bo-Zun was not in the Fiend domain at all. He had long transformed into Heavenly King 6 Brahma of the Buddhist monasteries and cultivated openly in the Pure Land of Bliss. Gaining enlightenment after his life and death experience was naturally just a facade. Emperor Bo-Zun was an expert among emperors to begin with. All he had to do was suppress and conceal his original cultivation realm before revealing it slowly. In the eyes of others, it was because he gained a blessing in disguise to become an emperor. Emperor Bo-Zun's true combat strength was definitely far above Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament, so he could naturally defend against the attacks of the Builder Tree. In fact, Su Zimo suspected that the struggle demonstrated by Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma earlier on as well as the bloodstains on his chest were merely intentional acts of Emperor Bo-Zun. That was the only way he could subdue the hearts of others. In reality, the effect of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma's performance earlier on was indeed not bad. It was not just the monks of the Pure Land of Bliss, the cultivators on the side of the 9 Firmament Immortal domain were in awe of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma as well. Even Immortal Queen Ling Long praised Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma endlessly. Su Zimo had a grim expression. If his deduction was not wrong and Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was Emperor Bo-Zun, the fact that Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was opening a forum in the Buddhist monasteries to preach sutras and spread Dharmic Tao was enough to send shivers down one's spine. Back then, Emperor Bo-Zun had already unified the fiend domain. He was surrounded and killed by emperor experts of the two domains when he tried to conquer the Pure Land of Bliss. Now that he had reappeared, he hid his identity and transformed into a Buddha. There was a high chance that he was after the entire Pure Land of Bliss. If the influence of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma in the Pure Land of Bliss grew and eventually reached its peak, he would have countless believers and monks under his lead. Bo-Zun's ambitions were frightening. In that case, there was a high chance that the Pure Land of Bliss would turn into a second fiend domain. Once cultivators fell into blind faith and worship, they would no longer possess rationality. The difference of whether they were Buddhas or fiends would lie on a single thought. At that time, there was a high chance that the Pure Land of Bliss would fall into an endless massacre and blood would flow like rivers. Su Zimo did not dare to continue thinking. Zimo, what's wrong? Right then, Immortal Queen Ling Long seemed to have noticed something amiss with Su Zimo and turned around, asking softly, "Senior, you have to be careful." Just as Su Zimo was about to reveal the identity of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma to Immortal Queen Ling Long, he felt a searing gaze. Instinctively, Su Zimo looked over and met with the eyes of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Those eyes were filled with benevolence and wisdom. However, at that moment, there was a strange look in his eyes when he looked at Su Zimo. Pest! Su Zimo shuddered and suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. His hairs stood on end and his scalp prickled. That gaze! Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma seemed to have already sensed something, and that gaze was a warning for him to watch his word. Given Emperor Bo-Zun's capabilities, nobody could save Su Zimo if Emperor Bo-Zun wanted to kill him right now. "Are you all right?" Noticing the change in Su Zimo's expression, Immortal Queen Ling Long frowned slightly. She followed Su Zimo's gaze and looked at Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma, who was not far away. At that moment, Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma had already shifted his gaze elsewhere, as though he had not looked at Su Zimo the entire time. Su Zimo's body stiffened and he lowered his head slowly. Upon hearing Immortal Queen Ling Long's question, Su Zimo was silent for a moment before shaking his head. "It's nothing much." Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma's gaze earlier on had two layers of meaning to it. First, it was to threaten him. Second, it was to remind him not to watch his words. Su Zimo was worried that if he revealed the true identity of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma to Immortal Queen Ling Long, he would bring upon death for her and the human monarch. Although Su Zimo did not say anything, his abnormality earlier on still attracted the attention of Immortal Queen Ling Long. Her gaze inadvertently lingered on Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma. Actually, from the beginning, she had already felt that something was amiss. Why would the cultivation realm of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma rise so quickly? However, those were merely passing thoughts in her mind. She did not think too much about them. Coupled with Su Zimo's reaction earlier on, although Immortal Queen Ling Long did not notice anything unusual about Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma, she made it a point to be cautious. At that moment, Su Zimo lowered his head slightly with a dark gaze and remained silent. There was something that he could not understand. Logically speaking, Emperor Bo-Zun had only met the martial Tao Prime body once. Today was the first time the Green Lotus True Body was meeting Emperor Bo-Zun in his Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma form as well. How did Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma know that he was the martial Tao Prime body? That was the only possibility why Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma noticed him right away and warned him with that gaze. Emperor Bo-Zun once pushed the martial Tao Prime body into greater Avicii. Why did he not attack the martial Tao Prime body earlier on and allowed the latter to leave? Chapter 26-25, 26-25 Think at length. 26-25 Think at length. Su Zimo had no intention of revealing the true identity of Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma for the time being. On the one hand, it was the warning from Emperor Bo-Zun. More importantly, it was not only in the Pure Land of Bliss. After this incident, Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma had also gained an extremely positive reputation in the hearts of the 9 firmament immortal domain immortals. If Su Zimo were to stand out and tell the truth that Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was Emperor Bo-Zun, there would only be a single outcome for him. He would be treated as a lunatic with ulterior motives. In fact, countless people would suspect his motives and suspect that he was a spy from the Fiend domain who was here to slander Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma and sow discord between the two domain. Even without Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma making a move personally, countless fanatic believers would stand out and tear him into pieces. Who would suspect a benevolent emperor of the Buddhist monasteries who sacrificed himself for others over the words of a grade 9 heaven immortal like him? Looking at the benevolent Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma who was surrounded by many immortals and monks, Su Zimo felt a chill in his heart. The situation in the heavenly world was getting more chaotic and no one knew what would happen in the future. Of course, what made Su Zimo feel relieved was that Emperor Bo-Zun was not without opponents. In this generation, Emperor Bo-Zun was not the only one who had appeared. A fiend emperor that was even older than him had reappeared and was now presiding over the fiend domain. Even if Emperor Bo-Zun could wreak havoc in the Pure Land of Bliss, he could only occupy that domain at most. If he wanted to regain control of the fiend domain, he would definitely have to go against Fiend Emperor Apocalypse. At that time, there would definitely be a battle between the two fiend emperors. It would naturally be for the best if it was an internecine outcome. Even if one party was defeated, the other party would probably suffer immense losses. This might be an excellent opportunity for the 9 Firmament Immortal domain. At that time, the 9 Firmament Immortal domain could even accumulate strength to suppress the remaining Fiend Emperor and calm the chaos. Who was that earlier on? Right then, a furious shout sounded and a tremendous might enveloped the immortals and monks of the two domains, causing their hearts to tremble. This was the wrath of an emperor. Su Zimo looked in the direction of the voice and saw Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament surveying his surroundings. His gaze swept past Immortal King Qingyang and the others as he asked coldly, "Long Night died and so did Qin Ce, but you guys saw no one? Are all of you blind?" Immortal King Qingyang and the others lowered their heads and did not dare to utter a thing. Although all of them were revered as immortal kings and many of them were supreme immortal kings, they had to bow down obediently in front of an immortal emperor. They did not even dare to refute the immortal emperor's scolding. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Prince Qin Ce was dead as well. Although Qin Ce was severely injured by the martial Dao Prime body and his body was destroyed, there was still an essence spirit carried and protected by Immortal King Long Night. To think that the mysterious expert hidden in the deep void had not only killed Immortal King Long Night, but also the Emperor's son, Qin Ce. Initially, Su Zimo thought that Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament was alarmed due to the death of a supreme immortal king. From the looks of it, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament probably only chose to come out of seclusion because he loved his son so much. Of course, there was another reason. That mysterious expert should have taken away the Grand Pure Jade Manual while killing Immortal King Long Night and Prince Qin Ce. Which of you has the Grand Pure Jade Manual? Right then, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament glared at Immortal King Qingyang and the others and asked coldly with a sinister tone. Immortal King Qingyang and the others were alarmed and shook their heads hurriedly. This was no small matter and they did not dare to be perfunctory. Immortal King Qingyang said in a deep voice, "Immortal Emperor, Qin Ce was first severely injured by Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain and his body was destroyed. Only his essence spirit managed to escape with the Grand Pure Jade Manual. Fellow Daoist Long Night carried Qin Ce's essence spirit and the Grand Pure Jade Manual with him in order to protect the latter. Now that fellow Daoist Long Night and Qin Ce are dead, the Grand Pure Jade Manual should have been snatched away by that mysterious person." Immortal King Kai Ping hesitated for a moment. "Immortal Emperor, I noticed that the methods released by that mysterious person were a little similar to..." He wanted to continue but paused. "Speak." Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament hollered. "They resemble the methods of the witch race." Immortal King Kai Ping said. Immortal King Qingyang nodded slightly as well. At that time, a ghastly green light indeed flashed in the depths of the void and entered the glabella of fellow Daoist Long Night, killing him. "The witch race." Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament frowned slightly with a dark expression. If this matter involved experts outside the heavenly world, it would be difficult to deal with. Could he possibly rush over to the witch world to demand for the culprit with just a few words from Immortal King Qingyang and the others? Even if it was truly done by an expert of the witch race, there was no way the culprit would confess to it foolishly. The greatest possibility was that this matter would be left unresolved. At that thought, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament felt frustrated. He merely felt pity for the death of Immortal King Long Night. However, Qin Ci's premature death and the loss of the Grand Pure Jade Manual enraged him. Immortal King Qingyang and the others could tell the likely outcome of this matter as well. As such, they could naturally guess the frustration and resentment in the heart of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament right now. Zen Master Hui Wen could not help but say, "In my opinion, the culpability of this matter lies on Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. The Supreme Arhat of the Pure Land of Bliss, Shi Wunyan, was killed by the Martial Dao Prime Body. Naturally, the monks of the Buddhist monasteries hated the Martial Dao Prime Body to the core. Since nothing could be done to the witch world, they might as well redirect the anger of Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament onto Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain." Zen Master Hui Wen said, "If Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain hadn't come over to wreak havoc in the Nine Firmament Immortal Domain and severely injured young friend Qin Ce before chasing after fellow Daoist Long Night, the two of them wouldn't have been ambushed and died." Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured. A moment later, he said, "Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain has the Hell Suppression Tripod and is already hiding in Avicii. Even with my capabilities, I can't do anything to him." Zen Master Hui Wen said hurriedly, "Although Desolate Marshal is hiding, his Tianhuang sect is still in the Fiend Domain. Why don't?" Zen Master Hui Wen's meaning was clear. He wanted to get Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament to destroy Tianhuang sect of the Fiend Domain. However, he was interrupted by a Buddhist proclamation before he could finish. Amitabha. Heavenly Lord Six Brahma shook his head gently and looked at Zen Master Hui Wen with a burning gaze. He said slowly, "Hui Wen, your killing intent is too strong. If you don't wake up in time, you might be in danger of turning into a fiend." Zen Master Hui Wen shuddered. The gaze of Heavenly Lord Six Brahma looked wise, as though it could read his thoughts and intentions. All his thoughts seemed to be exposed under the gaze of Heavenly Lord Six Brahma. Zen Master Hui Wen was sweating profusely from the gaze of Heavenly Lord Six Brahma. He lowered his head hurriedly and said, "Thank you for your warning, Heavenly Lord Six Brahma. I understand my mistake now." "Excellent." Heavenly Lord Six Brahma nodded slightly. "You have to remember that the difference between becoming a Buddha or a fiend lies within a single thought. Always guard your heart and make sure you don't fall into the Fiend Dao." Zen Master Hui Wen agreed repeatedly. Heavenly Lord Six Brahma turned to look at Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament and nodded slightly. "Patron, please calm down and listen to me. Although Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain is hiding in Avicii, we don't know if Emperor Bozun is hiding in Tianhuang sect. Furthermore, Fiend Emperor Apocalypse is presiding over the Fiend Domain. Patron, if you were to head to the Fiend Domain and Fiend Emperor Apocalypse notices you, it'll be difficult for you to escape unscathed. We still have to think about this matter at length." Chapter 26-26, 26-26 Arriving at the Battle Kingdom. 26-26 Arriving at the Battle Kingdom. "You're right, fellow Daoist." Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament nodded slightly and replied. In reality, even without the persuasion of Heavenly Lord Six Brahma, he could not have rushed to the Fiend Domain to destroy Tianhuang sect just to vent his anger. Tianhuang sect definitely had backing to be able to stand strong in the Fiend Domain for so many years. Ever since Fiend Emperor Apocalypse appeared, he swept through the Fiend Domain and conquered endlessly. However, he did not touch Tianhuang sect. That was a little interesting. Of course, it could be explained that Tianhuang sect was located at the borders of the Fiend Domain and Fiend Emperor Apocalypse did not fancy it. However, there was another possibility. Perhaps there was some faction or person backing Tianhuang sect that made Fiend Emperor Apocalypse feel wary. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament had lived for millions of years and was 10 times older than Zen Master Hui Wen and the other immortal kings. What had he not seen before? How could he not understand that Zen Master Hui Wen was trying to kill with a borrowed knife? Since Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma also stood in to persuade him, he did not insist and went along with the flow. To think that there were also traces of people from the witch world in today's incident. Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament's gaze was dark. Although he could not attack the witch world because of this, he was still prepared to head to the witch world to see if he could find any clues. At that thought, Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament cupped his fists towards Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma before turning to leave. He tore through the void and vanished. Everyone, please disperse. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma looked at the immortals and monks of the 2 domains and said with a smile. In the eyes of everyone, although Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma was an emperor, he did not have the arrogance of one and was very approachable. He was unlike Immortal Emperor Grand Firmament, who had a condescending attitude the entire time. The cultivators expressed their thanks once more. Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma nodded slightly. Before leaving, his gaze seemed to brush past Su Zimo's face inadvertently before turning to leave, disappearing at the end of the firmaments. After the 2 emperors left, the immortals and monks present heaved a sigh of relief. In the face of the 2 emperors, even immortal king experts would feel an ubiquitous pressure. This was the might unique to emperor experts. The might of an emperor was not to be offended. One could only be considered as the peak existence of the upper world after cultivating to the emperor realm. They looked down on the world and ruled over millions of living beings. Initially, the cultivators of the 2 domains were delighted to be able to escape. However, before long, the joy in everyone's hearts faded and they had conflicted expressions. The 9 firmament meet held by the 2 domains this time round was a complete failure. Initially, the 9 firmament meet was meant to select the Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat of the Perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings. To think that the 2 ranking lists would end up benefiting someone else. The so-called Supreme Perfected Immortal and Supreme Arhat became stepping stones for someone else's notoriety. Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain, Shi Wunyan had just become the Supreme Arhat when he was killed by a single punch from Desolate Marshal. For people such as Sword Immortal Yu Hua and Zither Immortal Meng Yarrow of the Divine Firmament Immortal Domain, they met with extremely tragic fates as well. Not only did Meng Yarrow lose to the Zither Fiend of Qianhuang sect in the Zither Dao, her appearance was even destroyed and could never be repaired. It could be said that Meng Yarrow had lost everything she once had at this 9 firmament meet. Her glory, her Zither Dao, her appearance and everything that made her proud were trampled beneath the feet of Desolate Marshal of the Fiend Domain. As though she had lost her soul, Meng Yarrow had a lost expression and hollow eyes as she followed the crowd of Mountain Sea Immortal sect like a walking corpse. There was no longer anybody surrounding her as the center of attention. In fact, many fellow sect mates of Mountain Sea Immortal sect revealed looks of disgust when they saw the menacing scar on her face and hid far away instinctively. Sword Immortal Yu Hua's outcome was even worse. He was struck by countless remnants of eternal damnation. Even if he could survive, it would be a fate worse than death. At the 9 firmament meet, the cultivators of the 2 domains were initially high-spirited. The paragons and monster incarnates of the Perfected Immortal and Arhat rankings were even more vigorous. To think that such a beautiful scene would be shattered by someone in the blink of an eye. At that moment, the cultivators of the 2 domains were a little despondent. They were not the only ones, even the Immortal King experts present felt bitter. In fact, Immortal King Qingyang and the others did not even want to recall the scene earlier on. The immortals and monks of the 2 domains, more than 20 supreme immortal kings and more than 100 ordinary immortal kings were defeated by Desolate Marshal alone. Among the cultivators of the 2 domains, a few of them had different moods compared to others. Yunju had a relaxed expression. Mo Qing lowered her head slightly and seemed to have thought of something with a faint smile. Why didn't someone as decisive to kill as Desolate Marshal kill me? I've already comprehended level 8 of the 9 palace subtle steps. How did he dispel it instantly? Jun Yu's eyes were still filled with confusion. Lin Lei could not help but lament, To think that desolate Marshall would be stronger than he was in Langfeng City in just 2,000 years and have grown to such an extent. Prior to this, Lin Lei had a sliver of hope that he would be able to challenge desolate Marshall one day. However, after today, that thought no longer crossed his mind. If you're in no hurry to return to the academy, why don't you head over to my place to rest? Immortal Queen Ling Long sent a voice transmission to Su Zimo. I happen to have something I want to talk to you about. All right. Su Zimo agreed hurriedly. I can pay a visit to Senior Human Monarch too. Su Zimo informed Mo Qing before following Immortal Queen Ling Long and the others to teleport back to the Battle Kingdom of the Green Firmament Immortal Domain. After arriving at the Battle Kingdom, Immortal Queen Ling Long dispersed some of the cultivators of the Battle Kingdom before returning to the palace with Lin Lei, Lin Luo, and Su Zimo. The two of you should head back and rest first. Immortal Queen Ling Long said to Lin Lei and Lin Luo. Mother, Lin Luo, and I have yet to greet father. Lin Lei frowned and glanced at Su Zimo at the side, muttering internally. Why was his mother so polite to Su Zimo? There's no need for that today. You guys can rest first and come back tomorrow. Immortal Queen Ling Long sent Lin Lei and Lin Luo away first before saying to Su Zimo, thank you for saving Leia and Luo previously. Only when he saw that there was no one else around, Su Zimo asked, right, how are Senior Human Monarch's injuries? Immortal Queen Ling Long hesitated for a moment before shaking her head gently and sighing. Indeed, it had not worked. Su Zimo frowned slightly. Back when he gave Lin Luo the Soraka fruit, he had also vaguely guessed that the Soraka fruit and 9 Revolutions Soul Return Elixir alone might not be able to heal the human monarch's injuries. That's also the reason why you led the group personally this time round, right? Su Zimo continued. Immortal Queen Ling Long nodded. If I hadn't appeared this time round and stayed in the Battle Kingdom, others would definitely know that the Battle King's injuries have yet to recover. My appearance at the 9 Firmament meet this time round can at least negate the suspicions of many factions. Chapter 26-27, 26-27 Entering Greater Avicii once more. 26-27 Entering Greater Avicii once more. Before long, Immortal Queen Ling Long brought Su Zimo to a chamber. The chamber was filled with an immortal fog and a strong medicinal scent. Through the thick fog, one could vaguely see a figure sitting in a lotus position on the bed, cultivating. Although they had not seen each other for many years, Su Zimo recognized human monarch Lin Zhon right away. Compared to when he was in Tianhuang mainland, the human monarch did not look much different. However, unlike the peerless glory and sharpness he possessed in the battle in Tianhuang mainland, the human monarch at that moment looked like an ordinary middle-aged man. Lin Zhon closed his eyes and frowned slightly, as though he had fallen into a critical juncture that could not be resolved. Su Zimo did not disturb him and merely waved it off to Immortal Queen Ling Long. Immortal Queen Ling Long nodded somewhat apologetically and guided Su Zimo to the other side to rest. Avicii. The martial Dao prime body was domineering and invincible at the 9 Firmament meet. He was able to condense a grotto heaven and suppress the immortals and monks of the 2 domains before escaping unscathed. It was practically a perfect situation. However, at that moment, beneath the Mara mask, the expression of the martial Dao prime body was a little grim. He recalled something. Earlier on, when he broke through beneath the builder tree and condensed his grotto heaven, he suddenly sensed tremendous danger. At that time, no one on the battlefield could threaten him. The sense of danger came without any warning and disappeared rapidly. Even with his spirit perception, he could not determine the origin. At that time, he was surrounded by 19 supreme immortal kings and did not think too much about it. Now that he recalled the fleeting sense of danger after calming down, the martial Dao prime body felt a vague sense of uneasiness. Did it originate from the mysterious expert that hid in the void and killed immortal King Long Night? Or did it come from Heavenly Lord 6 Brahma who descended later on? Or was it some other powerful existence that he could not predict? The feeling was way too terrifying. It was no exaggeration to say that this was the first time he had felt such a strong sense of danger since the birth of the martial Dao prime body. Even when he faced Fiend Emperor Apocalypse back then, he had never felt such a strong feeling. The martial Tao prime body pondered in Avicii for a long time without any clues. Under the builder tree, his combat strength increased exponentially after transforming into a grotto heaven. Right now, the martial Tao prime body was already interested in heading to the great wilderness. Back then, before Dai Yu mended the heavens, she noticed a sentence he wrote at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley and praised, "What boldness! You're comparable to me. I'll wait for you in the upper world. I hope that you can break through the mountains and rivers of the upper world and meet me again." Those were the final words left for him by Dai Yu. And now, the martial Tao prime body had cultivated to this point. In terms of his martial Tao realm, he was not a king yet. However, he made use of the variable true martial Tao body to condense a grotto heaven, allowing him to gain control of the grotto heaven realm first through another pathway. Given his current strength, although he was not at the point where he could break through the mountains and rivers of the upper world, he was already qualified to head to the great wilderness to look for Dai Yu. However, the martial Tao prime body was in no hurry to move. He still had many questions about Avicii and wanted to find an answer. All these years, he had often cultivated in seclusion in Avicii. He possessed the hell suppression tripod. Apart from Greater Avicii, he could roam freely in the various lesser hells and was long familiar with every single corner of this place. However, the martial Tao prime body could not understand why Great Emperor Infinite created Avicii back then. Was it to suppress the fiends? Indeed, there were many powerful living beings buried in Avicii. However, none of them worthy of this much attention from Great Emperor Infinite. The true core of the infinite hell was Greater Avicii in the depths. Legend has it that Greater Avicii was transformed from the flesh of Great Emperor Infinite. What sort of opponent would cause Great Emperor Infinite to come this far and even sacrifice himself to create a hell with his own flesh to suppress? What happened back then? Did this have anything to do with the legendary fiend lord who wreaked havoc in the Trichilia chasm? All sorts of questions lingered in the mind of the martial Tao prime body. Before heading to the great wilderness, he was prepared to explore the core and depths of the infinite hell, Greater Avicii. All the answers might be in Greater Avicii. Back then, he was thrown into Greater Avicii by Emperor Bozun and was trapped within, tortured. If not for the arrival of the Green Lotus true body, the martial Tao prime body would never have been able to escape. Now, he controlled the hell suppression tripod and could into a grotto heaven. His combat strength was sufficient to suppress supreme immortal kings, that was enough for him to explore Greater Avicii again. Apart from the hell suppression tripod, he carried the soul lantern with him. Furthermore, in the tomb of Great Emperor Heaven Burial, the soul lantern burned many ghost immortals and the oil was long filled. Once ignited, it could sustain him for a long time. Even if he encountered any danger in Greater Avicii, he could retreat at any moment with the hell suppression tripod and soul lantern in his hands. At that thought, the martial Tao prime body summoned the hell suppression tripod and held it in his hands. In a flash, he crossed layers of space and arrived above Greater Avicii. There was a gigantic pitch-black vortex beneath that resembled a door in the middle. It was bottomless and emitted a shuddering aura. Behind the door, it was as though malevolent ghosts were wailing and specters were flickering. The scene of him being thrown into the Avicii gate by Emperor Bozun flashed through his mind. At that time, he was forced into Greater Avicii. But this time round, the martial Tao prime body took the initiative to head to Greater Avicii to find the answer. The martial Tao prime body carried the hell suppression tripod and leaped. Previously, it was as though countless pale arms were dragging him into Greater Avicii. This time round, he held the hell suppression tripod in his hands and the pitch-black vortex beneath stopped. The Avicii fiend chi dispersed rapidly, revealing a passage. The hell suppression tripod was the emperor weapon of Great Emperor Infinite after all and was the key to Avicii. The martial Tao prime body passed through the Avicii gate and returned to Greater Avicii. The strange and terrifying feeling surfaced once more. After entering Greater Avicii, his 5 senses and spirit perception were completely lost. Although he had already controlled the power of a grotto heaven, the martial Tao prime body could not see anything in Greater Avicii. Here, there was no darkness or light and everything was unknown. He could not sense the passage of time and seemed to be floating in midair. He had nowhere to exert strength and could not sense the existence of space. Unlike the previous time, he held the hell suppression tripod in his hands this time round. The hellfire that was enough to cause one to fall into endless pain did not descend on him. The martial Tao prime body could not sense the direction and could only walk forward instinctively. The surroundings were silent without a single sound. Even his footsteps could not be heard. After a long time, the martial Tao prime body still did not discover anything. As he had expected, he possessed the hell suppression tripod and did not encounter any danger in Greater Avicii. However, he gained nothing as well. Should he continue walking aimlessly or should he leave? Just as the martial Tao prime body was hesitating, a commotion came from the depths of the unknown darkness or chaos on his left. Chapter 2628, 2628 Netherworld Treasure Mirror. 2628 Netherworld Treasure Mirror. The martial Tao prime body turned around suddenly with a grim expression. He propped his hell suppression tripod in front of him as a shield and his figure was faintly visible, prepared to transform into a grotto heaven at any moment and release his full strength. However, before long, the martial Tao prime body relaxed. The commotion over, there was not a living being, but a will. After walking in Greater Avicii for so long, this was the first time that the martial Tao prime body sensed the existence of something else, even if it was just a will. The owner of that will had existed in Greater Avicii for a long time. After it appeared, it released immense hostility towards the martial Tao prime body. It tried to shake the Tao heart of the martial Tao prime body and released various terrifying scenes in the consciousness of the latter, be it temptation, intimidation, or threat. The martial Tao prime body stood on the spot motionlessly and allowed the will to cast its arts nonchalantly. Such tricks were of no threat to the martial Tao prime body. It was just a remnant will without any material power and there were limited methods it could release. The martial Tao prime body had a calm expression and there was no contempt or mockery in his eyes, only sadness. The owner of that will must have been a top-tier expert who ruled over a region in the past and was comparable to a great emperor. Otherwise, there was no way Great Emperor Infinite would sacrifice himself to create this hell with body and suppress that person here. The martial Tao prime body had endured endless pain in Greater Avicii. The so-called infinite hell did not merely refer to the infinity of space, time, and suffering. It was also an infinite cycle. The moment one fell into Avicii, they would suffer infinite pain without any pauses. There was also infinite life. From a certain perspective, living beings that fell into Avicii were almost immortal. Unless Greater Avicii was destroyed, the living beings here would have to endure pain forever and would never be free. There was also infinity of self. Be it living beings with flesh and blood or just souls, every single inch of those bodies and souls would endure infinite pain. How strong was this expert who was comparable to a great emperor back then? However, after falling into Greater Avicii and enduring the pain and torture for a long time, there was only a remnant will left. The fact that it could now only release such low-level tricks against the martial Tao prime body was admirable. When the remnant will saw the martial Tao prime body wielding the hell suppression tripod, it must have regarded him as the successor of Great Emperor Infinite. That was the reason why it was so hostile. However, the remnant will posed no threat to the martial Tao prime body. "Who are you?" the martial Tao prime body attempted to ask. However, he realized that there was no sound when he spoke and the other party could not hear him. Even if the other party truly said something, he would not be able to hear it. This was Greater Avicii. All sounds or spirit consciousness voice transmissions were useless. There was no way to communicate. Because of the appearance of that will, the martial Tao prime body decided to continue exploring ahead. When the martial Tao prime body decided to leave, the remnant will revealed a pleading expression and wanted the martial Tao prime body to stay. Over a long period of time, while enduring endless suffering, the owner of this will was also enduring loneliness and pain. There was no sound, space, time or other life. There was only endless pain and torture. The martial Tao prime body ignored it and continued forward. After a long time, another will sounded from the depths of hell on his right. The martial Tao prime body could vaguely tell that this will was different from the previous one. However, similarly, this will was also extremely hostile towards the martial Tao prime body and released some low-level tricks to threaten him. The martial Tao prime body was unmoved and continued forward. A long time later, a third will did not appear. He walked in the empty greater Avicii for a long time, but only 2 remnant wills appeared fleetingly. Even after the martial Tao prime body lingered here for long, he gained nothing. Even if he encountered the 2 remnant wills, they could not communicate and he did not obtain any useful information. His surroundings were vast and there was no light or darkness. Under such circumstances, even if I continue, I'm probably not going to find any answers. The martial Tao prime body sighed gently. Just as he was about to turn and leave, his heart skipped a beat and he suddenly took out the soul lantern from his storage bag. After transforming into a grotto heaven, the martial Tao prime body could already defend against the powerful suction force on the essence spirit and soul when one's body came into contact with the soul lantern. The martial Tao prime body released an essence spirit fire and ignited the soul lantern. The soul lantern lit up and a ball of light appeared in greater Avicii. Light lit up and darkness accompanied it. Initially, there was no light or darkness in greater Avicii. However, as the soul lantern was ignited, the surrounding chaos turned into darkness and was gradually purged. There was a 10-foot radius of light around the martial Tao prime body. That bit of light made him feel slightly relieved. Right then, the flames that were initially burning vertically in the soul lantern suddenly deviated slightly in a direction. Hey! The martial Tao prime body focused his gaze. It was as though the flames of the soul lantern were guided in that direction by some power. In greater Avicii, the martial Tao prime body had already lost all sense of direction and merely continued forward. But now that he obtained the guidance of the soul lantern, he was invigorated. No matter what, the abnormality of the soul lantern was at least a clue. The martial Tao prime body took a deep breath and strode in the direction indicated by the flames of the soul lantern. After a long time, the footsteps of the martial Tao prime body gradually slowed down and he looked at the ground not far away with a confused expression. Initially, the soul lantern was the only source of light in greater Avicii. However, another light shone on the ground not far away. The martial Tao prime body walked over and focused his gaze. Half of an ancient mirror-like object was buried in the dust on the ground. The light he saw earlier on was reflected by the ancient mirror through the light emitted by the soul lantern. The martial Tao prime body pondered for a moment before squatting down and taking out the half of the ancient mirror from the sand. The ancient mirror had been buried in greater Avicii for a long time but still looked intact. The mirror shone with a strange blood color, giving off a sinister aura. This ancient mirror buried in greater Avicii was definitely not an ordinary item. Furthermore, it was a treasure from the era of Great Emperor Infinite. The martial Tao prime body held the ancient mirror and touched it with his palm. There seemed to be some marks on the back of the ancient mirror. He flipped the ancient mirror over. There were a few words etched on the back of the ancient mirror. Netherworld Treasure Mirror. Chapter 2629, 2629 Living Being. 2629 Living Being. The martial Tao prime body attempted to release his spirit consciousness and swept it across the netherworld treasure mirror. However, apart from a sinister and cold feeling, he did not discover anything else. No matter how he tried, even when he released the power of the grotto heaven, there was no reaction from the netherworld treasure mirror. The martial Tao prime body stood up and intended to put away the netherworld treasure mirror first before continuing to explore in the direction of the flames of the soul lantern. However, he suddenly realized that the netherworld treasure mirror could not be placed in his storage bag. Although the storage bag was open, there was an irreconcilable resistance between it and the netherworld treasure mirror. The martial Tao prime body did not dare to throw the unknown ancient mirror into his consciousness casually either. After pondering for a moment, the martial Tao prime body placed the netherworld treasure mirror in his embrace first and raised the soul lantern before continuing in the direction indicated by the flames. After a long time, a tall silhouette vaguely appeared in the darkness ahead. When he approached, The martial Tao Prime body was shocked to discover that what stood before him was a desolate and lonely ancient city. There was an ancient city in the depths of Greater Avicii. The ancient city did not have city walls. The entrance of the ancient city was like the mouth of an ancient behemoth. It was deep and dark within, and one could not see the path ahead. The martial Tao Prime body hesitated for a moment before heading into the ancient city. The ancient city was silent and there was no life on both sides of the street. However, after entering the ancient city, the despair, pain, and suffocating atmosphere in Greater Avicii seemed to have vanished. The ancient city seemed to be a world of its own, isolating the city from Greater Avicii outside. The martial Tao Prime body held the hell suppression tripod in his left hand and the soul lantern in his right as he walked along the street. There was nothing on the empty street except for his faint footsteps. After a while, the martial Tao Prime body seemed to have reached the end of the street and gradually slowed down. In an empty space at the end of the street, an ancient well was erected, looking a little abrupt. The martial Tao Prime body scanned his surroundings and only headed towards the ancient well after discovering nothing. By the time he arrived at the edge of the ancient well, the flames of the soul lantern had returned to normal. It was as though the ancient well before him was the endpoint guided by the soul lantern. The martial Tao Prime body lowered his head and glanced into the ancient well. It was dark inside, sinister and lifeless. His spirit consciousness entered the ancient well and vanished instantly like a rock entering the sea. The martial Tao Prime body leaned over slightly and extended the soul lantern into the ancient well slowly, wanting to see if he could discover anything. Right then, a voice sounded from behind him. It was extremely close. "What did you see? Pest." The body of the martial Tao Prime body froze and he felt a chill run down his spine, shocked. That voice was not a remnant will within Greater Avicii. The martial Tao Prime body could truly sense that there was indeed someone standing behind him, a living person. In fact, he could even sense the breathing of the person behind him. How was that possible? How could there be anyone alive in this ancient city in the depths of Greater Avicii? Furthermore, he had clearly scanned carefully earlier on and there was no life in the surroundings, let alone a living being. In fact, he did not even know when this person arrived. How did this person appear behind him? That voice sounded familiar. However, the voice appeared way too suddenly and strangely. The martial Tao Prime body was shocked and did not think too much about it. His spirit perception did not give him any warning. It was all right to assume that the intruder was not hostile towards him. However, there was another possibility: the intruder was strong enough to hide from his spirit perception. The martial Tao Prime body did not escape right away. If the person behind him truly wanted to attack him, there was no need for him to say anything. The martial Tao Prime body was completely unprepared. The martial Tao Prime body turned around slowly and held the hell suppression tripod and soul lantern horizontally in front of his chest, on guard. Although he was prepared, he was still shocked when he turned around and saw who it was with disbelief in his eyes. "Senior, it's you." A realization flashed through the mind of the martial Tao Prime body. It was no wonder why that voice sounded familiar. The person standing before him was the long-browed old monk known as the Tomb Keeper from the backyard of Azura Monastery on Great Tai Wei Mountain. The martial Tao Prime body did not have much interaction with this old monk who guarded the tombs. Back then, the two of them had met once. The martial Tao Prime body could vaguely sense that the old monk was extraordinary. Later on, the Green Lotus True Body, Yun Zhu and Mo Qing left Avicii and were hunted by 8 heavenly kings of the Buddhist monasteries. At that time, the old monk guarding the tombs was the one who killed more than half of the 8 heavenly kings of the Buddhist monasteries. To be precise, the old monk did not attack at all. A single sentence from him was all it took for a heavenly king of the Buddhist monasteries to die. He glanced at another heavenly king of the Buddhist monasteries and that heavenly king died on the spot. Out of the 8 heavenly kings, only 3 of them escaped in time by hiding in Avicii, allowing them to escape from the hands of the old monk. However, at that time, the martial Tao Prime body presided over Avicii, so the 3 heavenly kings could not escape the fate of death in the end as well. Thereafter, he had not heard any news of the old monk. He had asked Yunzhu about it but to no avail. Although the old monk looked like he was at the end of his road and could exhaust his lifespan at any moment, his strength was frightening. The martial Tao prime body had not expected to see this old monk again in this ancient city of Greater Avicii. He only managed to get through Greater Avicii and arrive here thanks to the hell suppression tripod and soul lantern. How did the old monk manage to get here? Even emperors might not be able to leave alive if they were trapped in a lesser hell outside, let alone Greater Avicii. Could this old monk that guarded the tombs be a great emperor? That thought flashed through the mind of the martial Tao prime body and he was shocked. However, he calmed down before long. There was no way he was a great emperor. According to his understanding, ever since Great Emperor Longevity passed away, there had not been a great emperor born in this generation. If someone had truly become a great emperor, the news would have long spread through the Trichilia chasm. Senior, why are you? The martial Tao prime body had many questions in his mind and could not help but ask when he saw that the old monk was not hostile towards him. However, before he could finish, the old monk suddenly reached out with his skinny palm and pushed towards his chest. The martial Tao prime body's heart skipped a beat. He watched helplessly as the skinny palm of the old monk pushed towards him. However, his body no longer seemed to be under his control and he could not move at all. Even with the hell suppression tripod and soul lantern in his hands, it was useless. What was this old monk trying to do? Was he trying to kill him? Why? In a flash, countless thoughts flashed through the mind of the martial Tao prime body. Chapter 2630, 2630 Loss of Connection. 2630 Loss of Connection. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind and the skinny palm of the old monk had already slapped the chest of the martial Tao prime body. The martial Tao prime body could not move at all and was prepared to die here. Given the strength of the old monk, even if he had a grotto heaven and a perfected true martial Tao body, he would not be able to withstand a palm strike as such. However, the martial Tao prime body did not feel any pain when the old monk's palm descended. To be precise, the old monk merely nudged him gently. At that moment, the martial Tao prime body was standing at the edge of the ancient well. After being pushed by the old monk, he lost control of his body and balance, falling head first into the dark and sinister ancient well. The figure of the martial Tao prime body was devoured by the darkness and he was falling into an endless abyss. The surrounding ancient city and ancient well seemed to have vanished instantly. The old monk was the only one still around. Arriving at the edge of the dark abyss, the old monk looked down at the falling martial Tao prime body. He smirked slightly, revealing a mysterious smile on his wrinkled old face. A strange look flashed through the depths of the old monk's hazy eyes. The next moment, the martial Tao prime body was completely devoured by the darkness and could not see anything. At the same time, he lost connection with the Green Lotus true body completely. Green Firmament Immortal Domain, Battle Kingdom. Human Monarch's Chamber. Enshrouded by the immortal fog, Su Zimo shuddered and clenched his fists instinctively. Suddenly, he stood up with a furious expression. When the martial Tao prime body entered Greater Avicii, the Green Lotus true body's attention had always been on the martial Tao prime body. After the martial Tao prime body refined the hell suppression tripod, it was equivalent to him controlling Avicii. Even though the martial Tao prime body was in Avicii and had even entered Greater Avicii, the two true bodies could still sense one another. Therefore, the Green Lotus true body knew everything that the martial Tao prime body experienced in Greater Avicii as though he was experiencing it personally. That was the reason why the Green Lotus true body lost his composure when the martial Tao prime body was pushed into the dark abyss by the old monk. He had completely lost the connection to the martial Tao prime body. Su Zimo's expression was terrible. The martial Tao prime body had just condensed a grotto heaven and the perfected true martial Tao body. In fact, he even had a direction for the dharmic formulation for the next realm of the martial Tao. To think that he would encounter such an undeserved calamity in Greater Avicii and his fate was unknown. Su Zimo had not expected to encounter the old monk in the depths of Greater Avicii. Less than that, he had not expected the old monk to push him into the dark abyss without a second word. Right then, Su Zimo felt something strange and looked over instinctively. Not far away, human monarch Lin Zhon and immortal Queen Ling Long were looking at him with worried expressions. His mind was focused on the martial Dao prime body earlier on. It was only now that Su Zimo snapped out of his stupor and recalled that he was in the chamber of the human monarch. I'm Su Zimo of Tianhuang mainland. Greetings, senior human monarch. Suppressing his emotions, Su Zimo took a deep breath and bowed. Lin Zhon nodded slightly. Immortal Queen Ling Long had a worried expression, as though she could tell that something serious had happened to Su Zimo. She asked gently, "Are you all right?" "It's fine." Su Zimo forced a smile. Even if he revealed this matter, the human monarch and immortal Queen Ling Long could not do anything about it. Even emperors could not come out of Greater Avicii, let alone the human monarch who was severely injured and minor Grotto Heaven immortal Queen Ling Long. "How long have I been here?" Su Zimo noticed that human monarch Lin Zhon had already woken up from his recuperation and realized that quite a bit of time must have passed. "It's been 7 days. Immortal Queen Ling Long said, "We saw that you seemed to be immersed in a certain state and was experiencing something. As such, we did not disturb you." Su Zimo sighed internally. To think that although the trip of the martial Dao prime body to Greater Avicii seemed short, 7 days had passed. Indeed, the passing of time could not be experienced in Greater Avicii. "Seniors, have you heard of the Tomb Keeper?" Su Zimo pondered for a moment and asked. The human monarch and immortal Queen Ling Long recalled carefully with lost expressions. They exchanged glances and shook their heads slowly. Su Zimo had expected this. Even Yun Zhu, who read the ancient books and was well versed in history, did not know the Tomb Keeper. It was understandable for the human monarch and immortal Queen Ling Long to not know as well. "Senior human monarch, how are your injuries?" Su Zimo asked again. No matter what, the human monarch's current injuries were caused because he disregarded everything and forcefully descended to Tianhuang mainland in the past, back when the human race of Tianhuang mainland met with a calamity. Lin Zhon waved it off and smiled in a carefree manner. "After obtaining your 9 revolutions soul return elixir and Soraka fruit, I've recovered a little, and my combat strength has also recovered to the Grotto Heaven realm. My life is not in danger." Although the human monarch did not say it explicitly, Su Zimo could tell. His combat strength was probably only at the minor Grotto Heaven realm at the very most and was far from his peak. The human monarch smiled. "Don't worry about me. I'm long used to being haunted by these injuries in the upper world all these years. On the other hand, you're truly shocked me and Ling Long ever since your ascension. In less than 10,000 years, your green lotus true body has already cultivated to the peak of a grade 9 heaven immortal. As long as there's a suitable opportunity, you can condense a Dao fruit at any moment and advance to the perfected one realm. Also, that true body of yours with the title of Desolate Marshal is even more powerful. You wreaked havoc at the Immortal Peach Banquet of the Jade Firmament Immortal Domain, and the battle in the 9 Firmament Immortal Domain shocked the world to its core. It's unfortunate that I did not get to witness it personally. What a pity." Human monarch Lin Zhon was all smiles as he praised Su Zimo with a gratified expression. All these years, he had been plagued by injuries as well internal and external troubles in the Battle Kingdom. He was worried all day and barely smiled. Right now, seeing Su Zimo was the happiest thing that had happened to him in recent years. On the one hand, it was rare to see an old friend from Tianhuang mainland and he felt extremely close. On the other hand, he was relieved that a junior from Tianhuang mainland managed to rise rapidly and become famous in the heavenly world. Back then, the reason why he endured the risk of being severely injured and forcefully descended was because he wanted to make use of Su Zimo's body to fight against the monarchs of the various races. That process was equivalent to him leaving his dharmic Dao to Su Zimo. Before leaving, he even passed down the position of the human monarch to this young man back then. Even human monarch Lin Zhon did not expect that the young man back then would be able to make such a name for himself in the heavenly world after ascending to the upper world. "Bring me wine." Emotional and excited, the human monarch waved his hand. Immortal Queen Ling Long pursed her lips and smiled. She said with bravado, "I've prepared it a long time ago. Count me in, we'll drink to our heart's content today. Unfortunately, we're missing Brother Feng." The human monarch shook his head gently with a regretful tone. Immortal Queen Ling Long took out 3 jars of strong wine and left one for herself before sharing the other 2 with the human monarch and Su Zimo. Chapter 2631, 2631 Demon Empress Blood Butterfly. 2631 Demon Empress Blood Butterfly. The 3 of them drank heartily before Su Zimo calmed down slightly. He then gradually let go of the matter of the martial Dao Prime body. It was useless even if he thought about it. Back when the martial Dao Prime body fell into Greater Avicii, he lost contact with the martial Dao Prime body. However, at that time, the Hell Suppression Tripod was in the hands of the Green Lotus True Body. After the Green Lotus True Body entered Avicii, he established a new connection with the martial Dao Prime body and saved the latter. This time round, the Hell Suppression Tripod and Soul Lantern were both with the martial Dao Prime body. Given the current cultivation of the Green Lotus True Body, he would definitely die if he entered Greater Avicii, let alone save the martial Dao Prime body. The only thing that made Su Zimo feel slightly relieved was that before the martial Dao Prime body fell into the dark abyss, the old monk revealed a mysterious smile. That smile did not seem hostile or murderous, as though there was a deeper meaning. Previously, when he lost contact with the martial Dao Prime body, he at least knew where the latter was. However, this time round, he did not know where the martial Dao Prime body went. Furthermore, this time round, there was probably no one who could help the martial Dao Prime body. Whether the martial Dao Prime body could survive and return safely depended on his own fate. At the mention of Feng Kantian and Tianhuang sect, they could not help but talk about the situation in the Fiend domain. Lin Zhon said deeply, because of the existence of Fiend Emperor Apocalypse, it might be difficult for Tianhuang sect to gain a foothold in the Fiend domain in the future. Immortal Queen Ling Long added, it's said that Emperor Bo Zun has reappeared in this generation as well. In the future, these 2 Fiend Emperors will definitely fight in the Fiend domain. Tianhuang sect should look for a way out lest they get embroiled in the flames of war between the 2 Fiend Emperors in the future. At the mention of Emperor Bo Zun and Fiend Emperor Apocalypse, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He recalled a question that had been buried in his heart for a long time and asked, legend has it that Fiend Emperor Apocalypse was an emperor expert from tens of millions of years ago. How did he manage to survive till this era? The human monarch and immortal Queen Ling Long were both immortal kings after all. They definitely knew more about the cultivation realms and powers of emperors compared to him. Immortal Queen Ling Long said, be it great emperors or emperors, their lifespans are similar and are almost always around 10 million years. In the records, only Great Emperor Longevity managed to live for 20 million years, and that's already unprecedented. Although Fiend Emperor Apocalypse is strong, he can't have lived for tens of millions of years. Pausing for a moment, Immortal Queen Ling Long said, I'm more inclined to think that Fiend Emperor Apocalypse had in fact died tens of millions of years ago. However, he was resurrected in this generation using some heavenly-defying dharmic formulation. Resurrection. When he heard that, Su Zimo frowned slightly and fell into deep thought. He had a feeling that he had neglected an extremely important piece of information. Suddenly, Immortal Queen Ling Long asked, Zimo, apart from us, did you know any other experts of the upper world before you ascended? Experts of the upper world? Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Apart from the human monarch couple, Dai Yu was the only other expert of the upper world he knew before he ascended. I know someone indeed. Su Zimo nodded and did not hide anything. However, she's not in the heavenly world. She's in the great wilderness. Back when senior human monarch descended, I even asked him about her but to no avail. Lin Zhon smiled. I'm only an immortal king of the green firmament immortal domain after all. I've only been to the great wilderness once and don't know much about it nor the many experts there. Back in the lower worlds, Su Zimo asked the human monarch about the name, Dai Yu. Later on, before Dai Yu mended the heavens, she told him that even in the upper world, there were less than 5 people who knew that her name was Dai Yu. Dai Yu even told him that if he were to ask anyone else, he might as well ask about the blood butterfly of the great wilderness. At that thought, Su Zimo asked again, Senior human monarch, have you heard of the blood butterfly of the great wilderness? At the mention of those words, human monarch Lin Zhon was not the only one. Even immortal Queen Ling Long's expression changed. Blood butterfly? Lin Zhon asked with a grim expression. Demon Empress Blood Butterfly? I think so, Su Zimo said. Back then, before King Yunyu's clone died, he begged Dai Yu for mercy and intermittently mentioned something about the Blood Butterfly and Empress. He was probably trying to call her name, Demon Empress Blood Butterfly. Immortal Queen Ling Long nodded and said, there's only one blood butterfly of the Great Wilderness. She's famous in the Great Wilderness, right? Su Zimo probed. In reality, he could roughly guess that from the reactions of the human monarch and immortal Queen Ling Long. It's not just in the Great Wilderness. Human monarch Lin Zhon shook his head gently and lamented, Demon Empress Blood Butterfly is one of the most renowned and strongest emperors in the entire upper world. The experts of the upper world might not have heard of the immortal emperors of the various immortal domains, but they have definitely heard of Demon Empress Blood Butterfly. I once heard Immortal Emperor Green Firmament personally mention that among the emperors of the upper world, Demon Empress Blood Butterfly has the highest potential and is the closest to being a great emperor. So strong. Su Zimo was secretly speechless and surprised. He had long imagined that Dai Yu was definitely extraordinary in the upper world. However, he did not expect her to be so strong. Immortal Queen Ling Long added, the butterfly race is innately weak. Even though the monarch butterfly lineage appeared, they can't compare to other powerful living beings. However, the rise of Demon Empress Blood Butterfly changed the status of the butterfly race among the 10,000 races single-handedly. It's precisely because of her existence that other living beings don't dare to underestimate the butterfly race. At the mention of that information, immortal Queen Ling Long's tone was filled with admiration and longing. Even her initially calm eyes rippled. Su Zimo was emotional as well. It was as though the figure in blood-red robes had appeared before him once more. She was invincible in Tianhuang mainland and killed all the witches in Tianhuang mainland with a single palm strike and a peerless bearing. He could not imagine how magnificent Dai Yu's past was. Immortal Emperor Ling Long continued, what's even rarer is that Demon Empress Blood Butterfly is a woman with shocking talent. She doesn't give in to anyone. I admire her immensely. If I can even reach 10% of her in the future, that'll be enough. Su Zimo burst into laughter. From the looks of it, immortal Queen Ling Long clearly viewed Dai Yu as a role model and a target to chase. Furthermore, immortal Queen Ling Long had not even seen Dai Yu before. It was clear how much influence Dai Yu had in the upper world. Su Zimo recounted how Dai Yu made use of her bloodline phenomenon to descend upon Tianhuang mainland and resolve the calamity of the witch race before mending the heavens to leave. This was the first time the human monarch and immortal Queen Ling Long had heard of this, and they were even more shocked. Lin Zhon said, back when I forcefully descended, I realized that I might leave behind a huge hidden ailment for Tianhuang mainland. To think that she was the one who stepped in to resolve it. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.